жив останнє на цей світ біленький, у смертну годину козак мовив так. Хай живе, живе вільна Україна, хай живуть вічно козаки, хай цвіте червона калина, нехай згинуть воріженьки на вічні віки, нехай згинуть воріженьки на вічні віки. Як вороги кляті нас на кіл саджали, як живцем палили, у смолі пекли. Козаки у хата життя не благали, про долю країни думи їх були. Хай живе, живе вільна Україна, хай живуть вічно козаки, хай цвіте червона калина, нехай згинуть воріженьки на вічні віки, нехай згинуть воріженьки на вічні віки. Хай живе, живе вільна Україна, хай живуть вічно козаки, хай цвіте червона калина, нехай згинуть воріженьки на вічні віки, нехай згинуть воріженьки на вічні віки. Хай живе, живе вільна Україна, хай живуть вічно козаки, хай цвіте червона калина, нехай згинуть воріженьки на вічні віки, нехай згинуть воріженьки на вічні віки. Хай живе, живе вільна Україна, хай живуть вічно козаки, хай цвіте червона калина, нехай згинуть воріженьки на вічні віки, нехай згинуть воріженьки на вічні віки.
Hello everyone, I am the Enforcer, and welcome back to the Day 74 news of the past 24 hours of the war in Ukraine. As per usual, the Ukrainians have held the line in almost every single area of the front, except for one, and we will cover that later on in the news tonight. But we have two bits of important news tonight. Of course, I would like to recognize tonight's fundraiser as a start. Doctors Without Borders has been the fundraiser 3 times in this channel's history, and once again, it has been brought up tonight in light of some terrible events that have happened in the Luhansk region concerning a school. Many civilians, if not tens of thousands of civilians, have been wounded by Russian strikes on civilian infrastructure during the course of this war, and in doing so have been injured to the point that some of them require serious surgery. Doctors Without Borders is one of the organizations that have been providing this wonderful care to the Ukrainian civilians, and they have continued to do so for an entirety of 2.5 months at this point. So, of course, as y'all may see, tonight's fundraiser goal is larger than any other goal in the history of this channel, set at $50,000. And the reason why I did that tonight is because we have a very special guest. And I think with the power of our Leaf Spring Army, and also the power of Operator Starsky's fans, and everyone else who may be joining the stream tonight, I do believe it is entirely possible that we can do even more good than the other nights that we've ever had on this channel before. And so with that, the $50,000 goal has been set, and I, of course, will be contributing the amount from our merchandise sales, as well as our $100 usual amount, and I also will be putting up an additional $100 for Starsky as well. And so I hope that that helps y'all to help me and Starsky support Doctors Without Borders and their wonderful cause in helping out the Ukrainian citizens. And also, I've heard a little bit of news that it may include some soldiers as well, although I haven't been able to confirm that information. So with that, we're now going to move on a little bit to hype this up. Of course, this will be later on the stream. Starsky will join us in the Kharkiv section and actually stay with us all the way through the Donbass. So, with that, a lot of y'all have been asking for Operator Starsky to join our stream. I, of course, have not been deaf to this, and I also wanted Operator Starsky to join as well. I don't have a lot of time to watch videos, but when I do have the time, I actually go and watch his videos a pretty good bit. And, of course, he is the most popular press official in Ukraine that has been giving us daily news on the war, and a lot of people have rallied around him in their support of Ukraine. And so I hope that he, along with me, can generate as much support as possible for tonight's Sunday fundraiser. And with that, we're now going to get into the schedule, and hopefully we will get to Starsky incredibly soon in the Kharkiv region. So with that, let's go over tonight's schedule. Starting off, we will be covering the Bucha Hostomel European area along with the Kyiv area. We will then move on into Russia itself, where we've gotten a decent amount of news that we've centered around Moscow, although some of the news markers may be off in their location and may have occurred somewhere else in the country. We'll then be moving to news into the far east side of Russia in the city of Yekaterinburg, where we will cover some interesting events that unfolded there. Finally, we will return to Ukraine to cover the location unknowns and also celebrate Mother's Day for the mothers of Ukraine. Once we do that, we will be moving into our first question segment of the night, and we will be bringing Operator Starsky onto the stream, where we will cover all of the news from the Kharkiv area to the Donetsk region, and hopefully everyone will enjoy that a load, and hopefully we can cover a lot of interesting information, considering that Operator Starsky's home unit is actually based in the Rubizhny area at the moment. So with that, we're now going to get into the news itself. Starting off in the Hostomel Bucha Irpin area, we've seen that the Prime Minister of Canada has visited the area. Prime Minister Trudeau has, of course, been somewhat of a controversial figure in Canadian politics, but we can see here that he is supporting Ukraine, which is, of course, a wonderful thing to see. Here we can see him reviewing the damage to civilian buildings around the city, well, really the metropolitan area, I call it, considering that Bucha, Hostomel, and Irpin have kind of melded into one large city, from what I can see on the map. And so we can see that he's over there surveying the damage for himself and getting evidence of Russian war crimes with his own eyes. Of course, we know that the Bucha Hostomel Irpin area is one of the worst areas that we've seen Russian atrocities occurring in, with hundreds of civilians killed and laid out in the streets. Right before the stream, Starsky and me were actually talking about what had happened in the Bucha Hostomel Irpin area, and a load of Russian disinformation that's been going around saying that it was in fact the Ukrainians that killed those people instead of the Russians. But all of us here know good and well that that's not the case. We saw the satellite pictures come out about a month ago at this point, showing that the bodies had been there 2 weeks before Ukrainian forces had arrived, which does confirm the evidence of Russian atrocities against civilian population, and hopefully those soldiers can be held accountable, the ones that still survived. With that, we're now going to move on into Kyiv, where we can see a couple of interesting bits of news today. Starting off, we've seen that the United States First Lady has visited the city of Kyiv. This is something of a twist, considering that this is now the highest-ranking official from the United States that has visited the country. Here we're going to see, of course, the normal motorcade layout for any sort of official from the United States of America, loads of Chevys, and so it is typical fashion. Of course, I'm not exactly sure what the First Lady of Ukraine discussed while in Ukraine. We do know that she did have a moment in a meeting with the First Lady of Ukraine as well. So we're not really sure what they discussed yet, but we will be keeping an eye out on any sort of developments and changes that occur in U.S. foreign policy in regards to Ukraine based off of that meeting. Moving on, we have seen that Patron has finally gotten a medal. We've loved this dog here on this stream for an incredibly long while. Patron has been one of the shining emblems of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, and of course he's been the light of many people's day, as we've seen this wonderful little dog helping out so much with such a small little body. And here we can see that Patron finally got a medal from the president himself for his service in this war. So I'm going to take this video all the way back to the start and mute it real quick. And here we can see Trudeau, along with Zelensky, with the dog. Unfortunately, we can't hear what Zelensky is saying.
Okay. That's a very special decoration for the young dog.
And we can now see Patron being awarded with a medal, along with his handler. Of course, the job of working dogs cannot be understated in this war, as Patron, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. I'm sorry if I am butchering that for everyone, but Patron has defused hundreds, if not several thousand bombs at this point from the figures we've been able to collect, and so that dog has done a massive amount of work, and I do have to say that awarding it for its services is, of course, greatly appreciated, and I'm sure that if the dog knew or cared what was going on, he would be very happy. But as we can see in this next picture, he apparently is just thinking that he's doing his job because he actually fell asleep during an interview on TV. Of course, wonderful little dog. We all love Patron, and I wish him the best of luck, and I hope that he saves many more lives during his service in the Ukrainian army. With that, we're now going to move out of the Kyiv area, and we're now going to move within Russia itself, where we've seen that the Russians are preparing for tomorrow. Tomorrow, for the Russians, is Victory Day, although that day for the rest of the Western world is today. And let me explain to y'all what happened historically to lead to that. The Germans, around April and May, of course, were having a very terrible time during World War II. Such a terrible time that the guy who pretty much ran Germany, of course Adolf Hitler, offed himself on April 29th, and then the country was left in the hands of Admiral Karl Dönitz. On May 8th, the unconditional terms of surrender were signed with all parties that were active in the Western Front, well, I guess you could say the Western theater of World War II. And so the war ended on May 8th for really everyone involved, especially the United States and the United Kingdom. The Russians, however, didn't actually agree with the signing of the peace treaty on May 8th because they said that the officer who signed those those unconditional terms of surrender was actually not high enough ranked to sign them. And so they sent over a new delegation that arrived on May 9th and then signed the unconditional terms of surrender, which officially made their Victory Day on May 9th, while the rest of us celebrate Victory Day on May 8th. So that's something of a little bit of a weird conundrum. And for the rest of the history of the Soviet Union, they celebrated Victory Day on May 9th. So with that, we're now going to move into Moscow itself, where we've seen that the brainwashing has started incredibly early in Russia. There's also been some really weird stuff surrounding Victory Day as well. And here we can see that they've dressed up kids in Soviet World War II uniforms the best they can, and they've also made them cardboard tanks. So I'm going to let y'all just see this video, and you can see how sick the Russians get with trying to make sure that their population stays indoctrinated and brainwashed into this entire ideology. Of course, I have this muted because I'm not really sure if the music playing is copyrighted or not. But we can see here that they've made a cardboard tank for this little kid. You can even see that the teacher is dressed up. And I'm not going to say anything about the uniform. I'm not exactly sure. I don't know what the female uniforms were during the Second World War for the most part. And we can see that the rest of the kids are also dressed up in little uniforms, and they also have made cardboard planes as well. And you just gotta say, that stuff's really weird. I mean, like, that's the highest level of indoctrination that you could ever imagine, is dressing up kids in kind of like mock-up military uniforms during the Victory Day and trying to really get them into that Russian victory culture around Victory Day. It's just really weird. It's very bizarre. And so with that, we're now going to move on to the next bit of news, where we can actually see that while those kids were doing a mock-up Victory Day parade in a way, we can actually see that the prep for the real Victory Day parade has been underway, and I have noticed an interesting bit of information in this video that we can get from just watching it. So as you can see there, they have their normal, looks like some kind of Kamaz trucks, but back here, they have BDRM-2s, and what's also very interesting about these BDRMs is that they're not in the usual Victory Day paint scheme that they normally have. The normal Victory Day paint scheme will have some kind of star, usually it has a red outline with a white center, and then it'll have a black and orange ribbon kind of flowing behind it on both sides, but we don't see this paint scheme on these BDRMs, and on top of that, the BDRM-2 is incredibly dated. And let's just pull up some information about that real quick to show how dated of a vehicle this is. And I don't actually remember, and I've watched all the Victory Day parades since 2015, a BRDM being in a Victory Day parade recently. So, let's see. The BRDM-1 first appeared in 1959. So if you do a little bit of dating, that thing's pretty damn old. It's so old, it might as well be World War II vintage at this point. We can actually see a BRDM here at the Fort Benning Infantry, let me make sure I get this right, the Fort Benning Infantry Museum, which I've actually been to before. It's an incredible museum, and if you're ever driving through this area, I suggest you go take a look at it. They have a wide array of equipment and military vehicles that they've managed to acquire or capture in multiple separate wars. And so with that, we're going to continue this video. And you can see that they actually have a sizable amount of BRDMs, sorry, correction there.
техника выдвигается на площадь на тренировку к параду.
Here we can see a Euro 4320 carrying an artillery piece, and that's the end of the video. I believe that the Euro 4320 is, of course, normal fare for the Victory Day Parade as far as I can remember, but the BRDM-2s are something new. I have not seen that ever, and so I believe that is actually showing that Russian vehicles have been lost to such a degree in the Ukrainian war that they're now having to actually pull up most likely reserve units using older equipment to fill in for the numbers in the Victory Day Parade in terms of the actual vehicle section of the parade. I guess you could call it the mobile section. And with that, we're now going to move on to the next bit of news from the Russian area, and we can actually see that a man on Russian TV has actually looked through the smoke and mirrors show that the Russians are running inside their country, and he's actually just realized something. So I'm going to let y'all see this. I'm going to make sure that the captions do show up on screen. If they do not, then I'll just mute the video and read them off. But we can see that he's come up with a very interesting revelation that we've been saying on the stream for quite some while. So here's the video.
Ставим, что, например, раздался грохот больших и малых барабанов, затрубили фанфары, объявлена мобилизация. Вот когда мы получим, например, первый истребительно-авиационный полк по мобилизации? К Новому году будет. У нас нет ни резерва, ни пилотов, ни летного состава, ни самолетов. Поэтому
So unfortunately, y'all cannot see that. Just saw that. So we're going to back up, and I'm going to read off what he's saying and also show you the video as well. So here we go. Let's imagine the drum roll, the sound of fanfare, and the mobilization is declared. How soon under this mobilization can we get the first fighter aviation regiment? We'd get it by New Year's. We don't have the reserves, the pilots, or the planes. So the mobilization would be of little help. If tonight we ordered new ships to be built, how soon will we get the first one? In 2 years. That's the deal with mobilization. If we set a goal of forming a new tank division, when would it be ready? I would say in at least 90 days. And it wouldn't be equipped with modern weaponry, because we don't have modern weapons and equipment in our reserves. Sending people armed with weapons of yesteryear to a war of the 21st century to fight against global standard NATO weapons would not be the right thing to do. Of course, we need to replenish the losses in terms of personnel, weapons, and equipment, but this should be done through industrial enterprises. Manufacturing modern, advanced equipment, mobilization would not solve these issues. And so in this little clip here, you can actually see the guy clearly saying on Russian TV, I don't know if he's been sent to the gulags yet or not for saying that, but the Russians simply do not have the reserves of vehicles nor personnel to properly field these vehicles, personnel that are properly trained, to actually make a mobilization worthwhile, and the amount of time it would take to actually levy new units would be so long that the war would most likely be over by then. Of course, we could see him trying to save face at the end and say that Russia needs to produce more advanced and modern weaponry, but we know due to economic sanctions from most countries around the world, the supplies, technology, and equipment they need to actually produce those vehicles is now out of the picture, considering that they can no longer even launch rockets from the Baikonur Cosmodrome, where Bald and Bankrupt was apprehended for several hours the other day, to even send astronauts to the International Space Station. So you're getting the picture that while that guy is trying to save face, what he said at the beginning is largely true. The Russians simply cannot reinforce the armed forces they have fighting in Ukraine due to a lack of trained soldiers and also a lack of modern equipment. They would pretty much just be sending more troops into the slaughter. With that, we're now going to move on further down to the next bit of news where we can see some Russians on Crocodile. I don't know what they were doing here. Like, it's the weirdest thing, but apparently this is some kind of Victory Day celebration video that they just made. I'm going to mute the video, of course, because it has copyrighted music in it. But y'all have got to see this. This is bizarre, and you'll probably get a very good laugh out of it. And so with that, here's the video. So we can see them marching and then getting on trampolines. What's the point of getting on the trampolines? What are they doing now? None of this makes sense. This is, of course, kind of like in that category of the weird Russian commercials, well, Soviet commercials that they used to make in the 80s. Like, this just doesn't make any sense. Now we can see them doing some weird stuff. And one thing that the Russians always pride themselves on is that TikTok culture hasn't made it into Russia, but I would have to argue that this is worse than TikTok culture. And also on top of that, the Chechen Stupidity seem to be having a really fun time with TikTok as well and showing off their stupidity, but I just don't know what's going on here. Like, maybe y'all in the comments could tell me what they're actually trying to get at here. Like, is this some kind of Russian mating ritual? I'm not really sure, but it's just goofy and silly at this point, and it really just summarizes the whole entire Russian stance of this war in a nutshell. It's just stupidity at its finest. And so with that, we're now going to move out of the Moscow area, and we're now going to move deep into the country towards the town of Yekaterinburg, where we've actually seen a very interesting sight. We've seen that an unknown individual, hopefully they'll remain unknown, has taken flight with a drone that has a Ukrainian flag on it. This was, of course, wonderful to see. We can see that the resistance in Russia does still exist in some shape or form, although they're not actively protesting anymore. And here we can see that kind of protest in action. Of course, I'll have to mute that because it sounds like copyrighted music, but you can see the drone up there as the camera focuses with a Ukrainian flag draped under it. It's so wonderful to see. I'm not really sure if the Russians have any way to take the drone down. It would probably take a sizable amount of time for them to do that. So it is good to see that some Russians do support the Ukrainian cause, and they are going through the links of even maybe serving in jail time if they're caught to show their support for Ukraine. On top of that, we also know that there's been a large amount of sabotage operations occurring inside of Russia as munition plants have caught fire in recent days under very suspicious circumstances. So, along with this passive form of resistance, we can see some very hardcore resistance against this war in Russia. With that, we're now going to move to the location unknowns. And as we move to the location unknowns, the time where Operator Starsky will actually be on stream is getting even closer. Before we move to the location unknowns, I would like to recognize that today is Mother's Day, and I do wish all of the mothers of Ukraine a happy Mother's Day. As we can see in these pictures, some of them have been put in very strenuous circumstances, but they still do not fail on their duties of being a mother. Here you can see what appears to be a Ukrainian mom teaching her child or helping them with their homework, which is of course something that is very essential to children growing up. Although a war is still going on, it is very important that they continue to learn and that the future of Ukraine is not jeopardized by this war. In the next picture, we can see a Ukrainian mother holding what seems to be nearly a newborn on a bed or a mattress inside of a Ukrainian subway. Of course, these pictures are always terrible to see, but there is always a silver lining in everything, and it is, of course, wonderful to see that she is all right as well as her child, and that they are safe inside of the metro. With that, we're now going to move on to the next picture, where we can see a mother and her small child looking like they're trying to evacuate from the country at some kind of train station, although I'm not exactly sure where. In this next picture, we can see a pregnant mother inside of a subway station, along with another one. I believe this may be some kind of impromptu maternity ward that was set up inside of a subway, although that is entirely an assumption, but we can see that she is laying on her mattress. Of course, this isn't the ideal situation to be under in any circumstances, especially not pregnant. With that, we can move on to the next picture where we can see a mother cradling her child as they are on a bus. I'm not exactly sure the context behind this picture. I'm not really sure if it's some kind of a civilian evacuation from a war-torn area or if it's civilians just trying to flee the country. I'm not exactly sure. And with that, we're going to move on to the next picture where I'm most likely certain that this was near a border, and we can see a mother with her child on top of the suitcase, kind of funny in a way, and she's carting them both down the road. And of course, we can see picture after picture, mothers taking care of their children the best they can. And of course, these are mothers worthy of the title of being a true mom. And so I wish them the best and a happy Mother's Day. And with that, we're now going to return to the location unknown news. Starting off, we've seen that the Ukrainian 14th Brigade has shelled a tree line in an unknown location, and it appears to have taken out several Russian vehicles along with a barrage. So let's take a look at this video. Of course, it's muted because it has copyrighted music in it, but we can see that the first artillery shell already hits something. The explosion seemed to be a little bit more pointed than normal, and so it does suggest that the Russian vehicle was hit with the first shot. The second shot appears to have hit somewhere in the tree line, but it doesn't seem to have hit anything. We can now see that vehicle that was hit by that artillery shell now brewing up. So that tank was certainly destroyed, and the crew may have gone with it. It's of course wonderful to see that the Ukrainians still managed to defend their country to the best of their abilities, and they managed to inflict massive casualties on the invading Russian forces daily. With that, we're now going to move on to the next bit of location unknown news, where we can see damage from artillery fire. This is apparently outside of the city of Kharkiv, where we can see a massive amount of shelling has occurred over these fields. It looks like days upon days of MLRS barrages have landed within these fields, maybe from both sides, maybe from just the Russian side or the Ukrainian side, but it nearly looks like a World War I battlefield with the amount of artillery fire that this field has taken. And so with that, that is the end of the video. Of course, the amount of artillery damage that has been caused around the country is severe, and the Ukrainians have been telling their civilians to not enter forests due to unexploded munitions most likely being inside of them, whether they be mines, artillery shells. They are incredibly dangerous, and hopefully Ukrainian citizens heed the warnings and do not enter the forests where the bombs have not been found and defused at this point. With that, we're now going to move on to the next bit of location unknown news, where we can see that every village in Russia appears to be missing its idiot, as we can see that they've all joined the Cataract Chechens, and they are acting like nuts on the field. So I'm going to let y'all see this video and unmute it real quick and start it at the very beginning, because this kind of stupidity must be shown raw, because this is what the Ukrainians are going up against the feared and elite Chechens. So here's the video. It appears that the Chechens' last thing they learned in basic training was actually firing guns properly. We've never seen a Chechen yet shoulder a rifle properly and fire it. They're always doing something stupid with them, and it's of course always wonderful to see that, because we know that they're wasting ammo, probably hitting nobody, and they're just tying up Russian resources and time and trying to make sure that this unit stays fielded, although it appears they have no clue how to actually fight. With that, we're now going to move on to the next bit of location unknown news, where we see some Ukrainian soldiers having fun in a trench. The music in this video may be copyrighted, but it adds to the context, so I'm going to play it. So with that, I'm just going to let y'all see the video. Of course, is pretty funny, and it's wonderful to see that Ukrainian soldiers are, of course, letting loose and having a little bit of fun, although they are under very stressful and dangerous situations. So with that, here's the video.
Ты что, блядь, снимаете? А ну, забабахайте танец. А все, де. А, понеслась. Ну, ты что, скаты качаешь? Сюда, да? В одну, блядь.
Ну що, сука, де вони там ті кадировці, резать їдьте будем нахуй.
And so that was the end of the video. It's of course great to see the Ukrainians having a lot of fun, even though they are out there fighting to defend their country. And it's good to know that they're not being too stressed out by it, and they can have a little bit of fun here and there. With that, we're now going to move on to the next bit of location unknown news, where we can see a Ukrainian Hurricane ripping up Russian units on film. First off, in the beginning of the film, we can see the Hurricanes firing off their rockets. Of course, I have to mute it. I'm sorry about that. It has copyrighted music. But we can see the Hurricane firing off its rockets. I believe the BM-27s fire a 203mm rocket, although I'm not specifically sure on that, so don't take that seriously. Don't quote me on it. But now we can see those rockets landing further downrange, and it appears that they're hitting Russian units dead on. Of course, great to see, and we know that the Ukrainian artillery is setting the bar in the modern world for precise artillery strikes. So with that, It's wonderful to see that the Ukrainian artillery still is managing to strike the living hell out of Russian units. And so with that, we're now going to move on to the next bit of location unknown news, where we can see our first video that we've gotten on this channel of a T-84 in use by the Ukrainian forces. And so here's the video. Of course, I have to mute it because it does have copyrighted music in it, but there it is, a T-84, one of Ukraine's finest tanks in their fighting force. Hopefully it's used to great effect and it isn't destroyed entirely soon. It does seem like tanks are in a very precarious situation on the modern battlefield, and a lot of people have been asking the question, are tanks even usable in the field anymore? We don't really know the answer to that. It's kind of on the fence, but it is an interesting topic to discuss. And with that, we're going to move on to the next bit of news, and we're moving even closer to having Starsky on stream. Once we reach the Kharkiv area, we will actually start the segment. And so with that, in the next bit of location unknown news, we can see the Russian version of Jackass as a Russian tank drives over 2 mines in quick succession. I bet you inside of that tank, the driver's saying, "I'm Ivan and welcome to Jackass" or something, because we'll see here in a second, he runs over 1 mine right there. And so the tank, of course, has been damaged by this mine explosion. But we can see this does not sway the tank driver whatsoever, nor the entire tank crew, most likely, as these orders are probably coming from the commander. And now the tank will roll forward again and hit another one. That most likely knocked out the tank, as you could see a little bit of fire coming out of the commander's cupola, it seemed. Let me go back real quick and show you all that. See just a tiny hair. It was like a frame, and you could also see a little bit of fire coming out of the engine bay near the rear. But that tank has most likely been knocked out. Of course, wonderful to see, and it's great to know that Russian armor never has it easy. And we also got a pretty decent amount of confirmation that the Russians were in fact the ones who planted these mines, and then this tank managed to roll over 2 of them. So I would say that that's definitely something that you would see in a Jackass film. So it's good to know that the Russians have their own version of it, and they're eating up Russian tanks, at least 1, as far as we can see. With that, we're now going to move on to the next bit of location unknown news, where we see a Russian drone shot down by Ukrainian forces and captured largely intact. As we can see here, this is a KUB-BLA, and it was shot down by the Ukrainian forces. Of course, wonderful to see captured. And with that, we're going to move on to the next bit of location unknown news. Starting off, once again, a lot of people have been talking about the M777. In fact, Starsky and me, in calls before the stream actually began, have been talking about the M777 a decent amount. And we have seen video evidence today, for the first time on this channel, although it has been around for a little bit, that an M777 was attached to the rear of a Ukrainian truck and is on the move in some unknown location. So I'm going to let y'all see this video real quick. And of course, it's got copyright music, so I've got to mute it. But you can see right there, that is an M777, America's finest towed artillery piece. It also uses the Excalibur round, which is an incredibly effective round. So it's very good to see that the M777 is in Ukrainian hands, and hopefully they are using it to great effect. With that, we're now going to move to the next bit of location unknown news, where we can see another Onyx being fired at Ukraine. An Onyx is a form of anti-ship missile that the Russians field a large amount, and now we can see them using it apparently against Ukrainian ground targets. So I guess you could say that its role has become something more of a ballistic or a cruise missile, more so than an anti-ship missile. That may give you an idea that the Russians are running out of missiles, although we don't really have a lot of information to back that up. With that, we're now going to move on to the next bit of location unknown news, where we've seen that Ukrainians, Ukrainians have been putting captured Russian T-80s back into service, and in this video, we can see what appears to be a training exercise as the Ukrainian tank crews are trying to familiarize themselves with what appears to be a T-80 BVM, one of Russia's finest T-80s in their fighting force.
Украинские танки после ремонта проходят обязательную калибровку перед возвращением на фронт. Учебные стрельбы проходят в нескольких километрах от линии фронта на Изюмском направлении. В строй возвращаются как танки, так и экипажи. Механик-водитель с позывным «Цезарь» — личность в этих краях легендарная. На предыдущем своем танке он сражался против Кантемировской дивизии, гордости российских бронетанковых войск.
Подбили танк, танк горел, я успел выпрыгнуть и это самое, отбежал от танка, а потом пытался спасти командира. Ну, танк сгорел очень быстро, и командир погиб. Наводчик обгоревший, но целый. Поэтому раскатали они меня красиво, конечно, поймали. Один танк против Кантемировской дивизии тяжело.
А если вам сюда, допустим, Леопард пришлют, или какой-нибудь этот самый Леклерк французский, или Абрамс, сможете?
Да, дня 3-4 и поехали. Да, я вам вполне серьезно говорю, дайте мне любой танк, и я вам через 3 дня, 4 дня буду не хуже, чем на Т-64 БВ, как механик-водитель. Я вам слово даю.
Извините, а сколько вам лет и каким образом вы еще в строю?
54 года, и танки. Очень люблю танки. Поэтому в строю. И любой танк, который будет, он будет тоже в строю.
And so with that, that's the end of the video. I wanted to make sure, of course, not to interrupt this interview with the Ukrainian soldier here, because Operator Starsky is roaming around through the live chat right now, and he is, of course, in the call with us. And so if he hadn't seen the video, which I'm sure he has, he's seen a lot of stuff, he sees things every day, I wanted to make sure that he could hear it along with our Ukrainian-speaking viewers. And with that, we're now going to move on to the next bit of Location Unknown News, where we can see a very nice dog. I really like this dog a lot. I'm not exactly sure. Once again, I have a lot of trouble figuring out what's a Belgian Shepherd or a German Shepherd. And if I had to say if this wasn't a German Shepherd, I'd say it looks more so like a Belgian Shepherd. And so with that, here's the video. We see that's an incredibly well-trained dog. Of course, the Ukrainians take great care of their dogs across the entire front and have gone out of their way to make sure to take care of stray dogs as well. While a small factor, it is, of course, great to see that the Ukrainians have a much larger capacity for humanity than the Russians do, which pretty much kill everything on sight and pretty much had evidence of eating dogs as well.
Хорошо. Хорошо.
Так,
Короче, я решила.
And that is the end of that video, but of course it's wonderful to see that such a well-trained dog is in Ukrainian hands, and we know that the Ukrainians have been taking wonderful care of all of their dogs. Of course, that's a break from all of the doom and gloom of the war as well, and so I always want to throw in a little bit of nice dogs and stuff here and there, so that way this news isn't too impalatable, just in case if it's getting a little bit too tough to bear, and we can at least make it through the news in a way. And with that, we're now going to move on to the next bit of Location Unknown News, where we can see a video of an M777 in use. Of course, I'm going to have to mute the video, but you can see here the Ukrainians firing the piece. Of course, it's wonderful to see America's finest artillery piece being used in action, and I would like to, of course, give a little bit of credit to the British who actually designed this artillery piece, although the United States is the country that is fielding it. So, an incredibly wonderful artillery piece. It is able to use a wide variety of guided munitions, which of course makes it that much more deadly, especially for the Ukrainians who have been using artillery to a massive degree and have been met with great success. With that, we're now moving on to the last two bits of Location Unknown News, and then Operator Starsky will be on the stream with us. With that, we can see Ukrainian rockets lit up the sky last night in an unknown location, as it appears that the MLRSs are working overtime to make sure that the Russians don't enjoy being there.
Доброго вечора, ми з України. Батарея, увага! Вогонь! Слава Україні! Відбій! Відбій!
Of course, kind of a run-of-the-mill video. We've seen MLRSs firing a whole bunch during the course of this war from both sides, but it still is important to show that the Ukrainians are using a large amount of artillery. Of course, none of them are all towed artillery pieces. Some of them are MLRSs, and it is good to know that they are being used to deadly effect, as we can see through all the videos of Russian vehicles being destroyed each and every day by artillery. In this last clip, now this was a miracle. I was actually able to confirm that this man was not shot in the head. So this is, of course, a miracle that this man survived. This Ukrainian soldier had the closest call anyone's ever seen on film here in this channel. A sniper fired a round at him and hit his helmet, which then bounced off his head, but he most likely got a concussion at the worst, and he was probably just a little bruised on the head at best, or had a sore neck. But still, this is the luckiest man alive so far in this war. And we see right there that that sniper just missed his head by inches, and that Ukrainian soldier survived. Then, of course, this is another testament to how crappy Russian soldiers' shot can be. Of course, this may be an incredibly long range, and the camera may be zoomed in. But considering that he missed, of course, that's a great thing for that Ukrainian soldier. He will live to see another day, and that's wonderful. The Russians suck at everything. They even suck at being a sniper when that's their only job. And so, of course, it's wonderful to see that the Russians are completely incompetent, and that, of course, gives the Ukrainians a much easier time in pursuing their counterattacks and pushing the Russians back out of the country. And so with that, we have reached the end of the Location Unknown news, and we will be moving on to recognizing some of our largest donors in tonight's fundraiser, answering some questions, and we will be bringing on the man, the myth, and the legend, Operator Starsky. How are you doing, man?
Hello, my friend. It's nice to be here today. And hi, everybody there on the chat. It's very nice to see you here also. So doing great. And how are you?
Doing pretty good. And so we're going to go over the next segment in a somewhat new way, actually, for the show. We'll actually be having Matthew recognize some of our largest donors here, and also ask us some questions, and we're going to try and answer them the best we can. We're also going to cover most of the news left in the Donbass, and maybe even revisit some of the older bits of news that we have here on stream, and some new ones if we happen to just start discussing stuff like that. And so with that, we're going to hand this over to Matthew real quick, who's going to tell us how much have we raised so far on this fundraiser, and what are some of the questions that me and Starsky can try and answer.
Okay, so good afternoon, everybody. It's Enforcer Matt once again. We have a hell of a night tonight. We have Starsky on the chat, which is absolutely amazing to have him here, and I thank him very much for being here. We have hit $18,000 on the donations, which is incredible because I think we're like 40 to 45 minutes in. And Enforcer, can you confirm that that's the correct number on the donations on your end?
That is the correct number. We've already gotten to $18,000, which means that we're about 40% of the way towards our goal of $50,000 for Doctors Without Borders. And that is something, and I have to thank you all so much once again. And this is something of a speech that I don't think Starsky has heard, but it's something that y'all probably heard a lot. I have to say that this is probably the best community that we have ever been able to acquire anywhere on the internet. There's a whole bunch of very nice people here in this YouTube channel and in this live chat that support Ukraine to the umpth degree. I don't even know how a lot of y'all support Ukraine the way y'all do, but we can see that somehow y'all find a way, and y'all mean that y'all believe in this cause and y'all will support it to the very last. And I have to thank you all so much once again. I can't believe that our channel is the channel that is the one to pretty much get this wonderful community of people. I don't know what's actually caused it, but I thank you all so much once again for sending in this amount of support, and it will help out Doctors Without Borders and helping out wounded Ukrainian civilians to a massive degree. And I'm sure that if the Ukrainians who were saved due to our fundraisers through the surgeries that are provided could thank you all, I'm sure they would. But still, just because we're doing something doesn't mean we want a thanks or anything like that. We're just doing it because it is the right thing to do. And so with that, I just remembered that I need to send in my $300 real quick to make sure that we can carry through on this promise that we make here on this channel. And so let me send that through. And while we do, could you recognize some of our largest supporters for this fundraiser tonight, Matthew?
Okay, and first up, I want to give a big thanks. Naria deserves her moment. She puts in a $5,000 donation, and you heard that right, $5,000
Really?
to Doctors Without Borders, which is absolutely insane. And I think it's the highest donation we've ever had on the stream from a viewer.
That is the highest donation on stream, and I thank you so much, Naria. If Starsky, have you ever heard about Naria?
No, I don't think so.
All right, so let me tell you a little bit about Naria. Naria is the legend of this stream. Every single Sunday fundraiser we do, she comes in here and she'll drop thousands of dollars into anything that we're trying to support. And I've honestly, at this point, we've been saying that a statue of her should be built somewhere for the amount of support she's given. And this is pretty much run of the mill for her, but we're still amazed. And I thank you so much once again, Narya, for coming through with such a wonderful and massive amount of support for Doctors Without Borders. So I thank you very much. And before I get distracted, let me make sure I go through and send in the amount of support for me, Starsky, and also the 10% off of the merchandise sales that have supported this channel so far. And I once again thank you all so much for helping me keep the lights on and keep on running this thing. And so, give me just a second, y'all. And while we do that, could you recognize some more of the largest donors of tonight's stream, Matthew?
And real quick, we typically don't do this on donation night, but Naria, I'm going to go ahead and read off this comment. She says, Enforcer Matt, please pass on my love and admiration to Operator Starsky. And I'm sure he appreciates it very much. And Naria, just thank you so much for your support. It's amazing. Up next, we have a $1,000 donation from Dutch R. Jen. And bear with me, I'm about to list off a bunch of names here. We have a $500 donation from Paolo Corradini, a $450 donation from Walter Lakota Jr., a $300 donation from Red Queen 0324, a $250 donation from Rustin Rott, a $200 donation from Gooch Booch. And then we have several $200 donations from George Swanson, Awao Tanaka, Ryan Miller, A007 Spy, James Reyes, HT. And we have several $100 donations as well. We have one from Just P, No Fear 4x4, Dad Good, Turn Off Your Gaslight, AZ, NBD, Crash Force, Inhawk, Signo, Chris Mack, Mycroft, Caffeine, Mike Klinkowski, Coffee Attack, Michael Francis, Bill Fan, Rob Scott, Nick 916, and BC Skyman. And we just got a $100 donation in from Can Kitty as well. So thank you all for your support. I am out of breath from reading off all those names, but we're actually at 20,000 now. I'm not sure how we got there. Maybe I missed a
We've gotten to 21,000 now.
Wow.
Goodness.
I don't even see the donations for it either. Do you see them, Enforcer?
Yeah, I saw it. It's from Anonymous though, so sadly we can't actually recognize them. But still, with that, I thank you all so much once again for your support. And it is wonderful to know that we can always come together every single Sunday and manage to do so much good in the pretty much avenue that we can. As of this fundraiser, before it started, we had already raised $167,000 as of the last time I checked in support for Ukraine through various organizations. And now it looks like tonight we will definitely be surpassing that $200,000 mark. Once again, I want to explain to everyone that this is run through YouTube Give. YouTube actually does not take any percentage of these fundraisers, and they also do all the accounting and also do all of the fee charges as well for processing these donations. So it's a wonderful system, and I do thank YouTube a whole bunch for making sure that we can do something like this. And with that, we're not going to bump our gums any longer. We're now going to go to the questions, and Starsky and me are going to try and answer them. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
Okay, and first up, Operator Starsky, we have a question from you from the chat from Greenville Hauser, who says, Operator Starsky, what do you think Putin will announce in his speech on May the 9th?
Probably he will announce something related to their huge victory, quote unquote, huge victory in Ukraine, all those destroyed airports full of weapons that came from NATO and stuff like that. I don't think that he's going to announce the mobilization in Russia. Yeah, I think that he will say that they have reached most of their military goals in Ukraine and stuff like that. So, yeah, something like that.
So you're thinking that they're also trying to lower the bar each time that they pretty much declare their new intentions as well, because they went from the entire annexation of Ukraine to now they went to, we're just going to take the Donbass. And so now you think they're actually going to lower that bar even further?
Yeah, I think they will be talking about, for example, capturing of Mariupol that didn't happen, and probably they will talk about that as their biggest victory, because they control like suburban area and area around Azovstal. Yeah, well, we all remember that they attempted to capture whole Ukraine, And then they were happy about capturing Chernobyl, that polluted Chernobyl area. And they were so happy about that. I received a commentary from Russian saying like, haha, we captured Chernobyl. You suck. And I'm like, what are you talking about, man? And yeah, and by the way, remember that video where Kadyrov is showing off that car?
Mm-hmm.
So the secret of this car is that it comes from Chernobyl. So it has this some of this Chernobyl magic that will be shared with its new owner as well.
Oh, yay. So what you're saying is that when he hops in the car, he's going to have 2 arms and 2 legs, and when he hops out, he's going to have like 12 fingers, 3 arms, and 2 legs?
Yeah, something like that, because this car, well, it belonged to a unit that was guarding that power plant, and actually I know a bunch of people from that unit, and yeah, it spent quite a lot of time in Chernobyl area. So,
Well, that's pretty good to know. Also, another thing is that did you ever see the videos of all the defensive, pretty much entrenchments they built within the exclusion zone?
I will tell you even more. They made a lot of their fortifications in that exclusion zone using sandbags full of that magic sand. Let's call it this way.
So wait a minute, you're telling me that not only did they dig out the radioactive ground, but they also took the radioactive ground and put it in the sandbags, and so like their hands and stuff and everything were just getting covered with the sand constantly, like they're actually getting like contact with it.
Of course, they were like sleeping on those bags and stuff. That's from what I know, because I talked to people who worked in that power plant. They told me that, oh my god, there were so many of them already having those burns. So yeah.
Oh man, that's kind of terrible, but of course, it's kind of funny in a way. But still, I was wondering, what did you think about the little circus performance that the Kadyrovites put on for us in that one clip in the Location Unknowns?
So you mean that those women jumping on those trampolines?
No. I mean like the guy who was doing like the full like Rambo routine. Let me make sure I can find it real quick.
Yeah. I know what you're talking about. So yeah, so that's very typical for those people. And yeah, it's kind of funny because Russians have lost a lot of men fighting during the first Chechen war because they were fighting other kinds of Chechens. So here in Ukraine, Chechens who lived in Ichkeria and had to move out because of Kadyrov and because of Putin and all that. So they are getting very angry whenever we call those Kadyrovites Chechens. So yeah, it's like totally different kind of people, totally different nation, because real Chechens are currently fighting together with Ukrainians against Russian invader. And I know a lot of those people, and they are true warriors and true heroes.
We actually saw a couple of those on film a couple of weeks ago. We actually saw their unit several times actually, and they actually looked a lot better put together. Well, that was a bit of like a double down on kind of look like, but they looked much better put together than the actual Kadyrovite forces on the Russian side. Like they actually were firing their rifles the way you expect, where you actually put the stock of it on your shoulder instead of just holding it up in the air and spraying on full auto. So it's good to know that y'all actually have the actual Chechens instead of the sellouts, I guess you could say, that are still in Grozny, that are pretty much bootlickers for the Russians in a way. And considering that they actually went through the same atrocities that the Russians are inflicting on y'all right now, it's crazy to me to think that they would even fight for the Russians in the first place.
Yes, yes, that is true. And regarding atrocities, I think that on the very first day of that invasion, we've had information from some of Syrians that were telling us that we should keep, locations of our shelters in secret from Russians because they will be targeting those shelters. And for example, like a week later, we all saw what they were doing, like when they started using their MRLS in order to shell Mykolaiv, I think. It was Mykolaiv and Kharkiv that were shelled by their uh, MLRSs at, at the beginning. And then you remember in Mariupol, they bombed that theater used as shelter. And the thing is that in front and behind of this theater, there were huge letters made on the ground saying children. So that pilot bombed this theater specifically knowing that there are children inside. So yeah, those Syrians were true, were right, and I think that we should have listened to them more, of course, at the beginning of this invasion.
Yes, that's true as well. And also speaking about the loss of the several hundred people that has been reported so far, they're saying that the number could be anywhere around 600 killed in that one theater alone. We can see that those kinds of attacks are still being carried out in a large amount of the Donbass region. And I think we actually got some news about that today. And I think you may be able to talk about it a little bit better than me. So could you tell all the viewers what's happened in the Luhansk area today concerning the school?
What news once again?
I believe it was the news that a Russian aircraft had bombed a school, and there may be around 60 people that have been killed in that school out of the 90 people that were in there.
Yeah, so yes, we have information that Russian airplane probably they were using Su-24 or Su-25 bombed school. And by the way, we've been warned previously that they will be performing those actions, and we warned international society about that. So obviously they decided to implement that. And also we have information. It's not related to Luhansk. It's related rather to Russian cities like Bryansk, Kursk, and stuff. So I think about a week ago we received information that Russians were ordered to bring remains of captured UAVs and our airplanes that were downed by Russians. They were ordered to bring those remains to those cities, Kursk, Bryansk, and Belgorod, in order to stage some kind of, bombing in that area, and blame Ukrainian army, and probably use that as a reason to start mobilization. So I think I even reported that on my YouTube as well, because we always have to talk about such things, even if they don't happen in the end, but we have to talk about them to warn people that those things are being prepared.
All right. And I do have to agree as well. We've heard a lot of things coming out of the Russians for quite some while now that have been very concerning. A lot of it concerning the West, and a lot of my European viewers outside of Ukraine and American viewers as well, has been the threats of nuclear attack. And with that, we're actually going to round out this question, and we're going to move to the next one. And so what do we got, Matthew?
Okay, and just a quick note for everybody that's asking. Unfortunately, YouTube still does not allow donations from Australia. Unfortunately, it's nothing we can do about it, but we appreciate the thought. But however, we can't change it, unfortunately. So that is unfortunately that. And also, I just want to quickly note that if everybody would like to just put in a small donation of just $5, we can easily get close to reaching our goal. So if everybody wants to do that, please feel free. we're actually helping people on the ground with Doctors Without Borders. So we appreciate your help very much with that. Up next, we have a question from Blue Cheese Has Mold on It, who says, do either of you know how much is going on, or excuse me, let me start over. Do either of you know much about what is going on in Mariupol? Does the Azov battalion have a plan of some sort to get out?
Right now, at the moment, according to the news we've been able to collect on this channel, the defensive perimeter has been breached around the Azovstal, and it has been breached for nearly 4 to 5 days at this point. No one really knows exactly the fate of the Azovstal at this point. I'm not entirely certain about that. Starsky may have some differing information to mine, but right now the situation does look rather grave, and hopefully they can manage to push the Russians back out of the defensive perimeter and reestablish it without taking too many losses. But once the defensive perimeter during a siege has been breached, usually that's a bad scenario. For example, at the Alamo, when the defensive perimeter of the walls of the actual missionary were breached by the Mexican army, pretty much the rest of the missionary fell very soon afterwards. I'm not really sure if there is a breakout plan for the defenders of the Azovstal, which I believe encompasses the 36th Infantry Brigade along with the Azov as well. But I believe that Enforcer Starsky may actually have a little bit to add to that as well. So what you got, Enforcer? Oh, I mean, not Enforcer, Operator Starsky.
I have information that there was a briefing held online by one of their officers, and I think that it's available online as well. And good news is that it's at least partially in English, so you can find it on YouTube, I guess. Yeah, and they answered a lot of questions that are interested for our audience. As for their plan B, it's hard to say. Knowing Azov, I think they have one, because I know quite a lot of people from Azov. Azov is quite you know, closed community, like among our military units. They keep you know, not like isolated, it's a bad word, but they have a lot of traditions, and you can trust only your brothers of your kind, stuff like that. So I'm sure that they are not telling about that to everyone, but I think that they have some kind of plan B.
And hopefully they do, because it seems like the situation is getting worse there. I'm not really sure if you've heard that information as well, but from what I've been able to collect from video evidence, it does appear that their actual, I guess you could say, ability to defend the Azovstal is appearing to get worse and worse now that the Russians have been guided through the tunnels that lead directly into the center of the Azovstal. I'm not really sure if that is entirely accurate, so maybe it is or isn't, but I'd like to run that by you, Starsky, just to make sure.
Also, fact is that whenever you move out from the position that was, for example, damaged or endangered, you are moving back to a better position, and this position, that secondary position, is usually better prepared. So I think they have more chances. For example, yesterday we have moved from Poposna. You know where Poposna is?
Yes, I actually have a marker there today, right here.
So our forces have moved back to the positions that were better prepared for defending that village, because the village got absolutely destroyed by Russian fire. So that's probably something the same happens in Azovstal as well.
All right. So you actually think that the position is still defensible?
Yes, of course. I think that they move to positions that are better prepared, and it's always it's not like better in operational terms, but yeah, it's better for saving their lives.
Well, hopefully it is. I of course hope that the Azovstal defenders as a whole, the 36th Infantry Brigade, as well as the Azov itself, do make it out of this just fine. We have known so far that they have held this city under siege for 70 days with a lack of supplies from the outside for the most part, except for the occasional supply run that may have managed to make it through to them. And it is, of course, a massive achievement and shows how much they actually believe in the cause of defending their country that they call home. So I do have to agree that that is something very impressive that they've been managing to do, and hopefully they can continue to do so, because every single day they manage to hold anything within Mariupol, whether it be just a square mile of ground or just one. I'm going to start covering a little bit of news and see if Starsky wants to add anything to it, maybe a little bit of analysis. And I'm just wanting to check with you, Starsky, before we move to this. Are you getting a live feed of the stream, or is it a bit of a lag in between what I'm saying and what's showing?
Yeah, I have a bit of a lag, like maybe 30 to 40 seconds of lag.
Gotcha. So real quick, actually, I'm going to pop in here. I'm going to go over here real quick and actually stream my screen to you, so that way you can see it live. Hopefully it doesn't have any audio issues. So can you see it live now?
Yeah.
All right. So we're going to move on to the news that we've gotten around the Kharkiv area and move through the Donbass and answer some questions as well along the way and see how we do. So with that, we're going to start off north of Kharkiv. This marker is not accurate. We're not exactly sure where this occurred near Kharkiv, but we do know that it occurred in the area. And we can see that there have been abandoned Russian trenches near Kharkiv. Not exactly sure where again, so the marker isn't entirely accurate. And so here is the video. Let me unmute it real quick so that way we can see it. And there is also text-to-speech, well, speech-to-text translation at the bottom of the screen for everyone else.
Так, перша армія, чи друга армія, хуй вас просиш. Ось тут стояла техніка, блядь, в цьому капонірі. Тут, пожалуйста, блядь, сразу вийшов з техніки, посрав, блядь, викинув трохи мусор, блядь, і пішов. Пішов по мусору, хопа, на велик сів і поїхав. Поїхав, бігом. Тут нарисований хрест. Помолився, ще посрав і пішов в столову. Пожалуйста, тут у них була столова. Тут вони їли. От молодці, поїв, посрав, на велику покатався і в техніку. Козли.
That was an interesting video. Did you notice that they were kind of relieving themselves in the trench?
Man, this looks so similar to what we saw on every Russian position, especially in Hostomel. We returned to our base that was captured since the first day. Yeah, that's exactly what they do. So they basically eat, sleep and defecate in the same area, in the same 3 square meters, which is crazy.
Interesting. So what you're saying is that while they are taking losses, they can actually just squat down in their trenches and just shoot out another Russian soldier ready to go.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that's barbaric. I mean, like, I mean, like, you know, of course there is situations where that would happen, like if they're under artillery fire and stuff, and so, I mean, like, still is barbaric nonetheless, but would Ukrainian soldiers do that?
No, man, we have our toilets like way away from our positions, and it was also it was always like that. We have to go to toilet despite the danger of enemy fire, because, well, in Ukrainian culture, let's say, we have to have this toilet like 100 meters away from our positions. For some reason, of course, it's not very convenient, and sometimes under fire you gotta do your stuff, like not in your own trench, but at least not too far from it. But anyways, in other circumstances, you have to have this toilet like way, like much away from your position.
Well, I mean, like, it's a good thing it's a good thing to know y'all aren't doing the same thing, because you know that must reek. You know, actually, you could probably smell a Russian soldier coming up on you, kind of like how you can smell a bear. If you know what I'm talking about, you know how bears have like that really bad smell? I bet you hanging around crap in their own trench probably gives them a pretty bad smell.
Well, that's why they are called Russian bears, I think.
Oh, that was a pretty good one. All right, that was pretty good. Very solid. Everyone, that's Operator Starsky right there. So with that, we're now going to move on to the next clip of information that we've gotten from the Kharkiv area, where we're going to see an ammo dump being destroyed on film. Of course, we don't know exactly how large this ammo dump was, but any ammo dump destroyed is, of course, damaging Russian logistics to a severe degree, considering that their logistics are already very shaky, if not entirely falling apart, much like it was in the Northern Front for the first month of the war. So here's the footage, real quick. You know, Starsky, it's very nice of the Russians to provide free fireworks shows for the Ukrainian forces.
Yeah, they do, and they often provide us with ammunition and tanks as well.
How many captured tanks have the Ukrainians gotten so far?
I don't know the exact number, but we've had some research made like a couple of weeks ago, and it seems that currently we have a bit more working tanks than Russians.
Really?
Yeah, that was in the news even.
Wow, I actually haven't heard about that. I don't know if anyone else on the stream has, but that's insane. Like, so you're saying that the actual amount of tanks that the Russians have in their invasion force is now smaller than the number y'all have?
We're talking about working tanks, that those who move and shoot at the same time. And yeah, in this case, we have like not dramatically, but still more tanks than Russian forces. Unfortunately, not so much regarding our airplanes, and yeah, we need more airplanes and more helicopters, of course, to perform our tasks in a much efficient way.
Speaking of which, I'm sure that you've heard about the Lend-Lease being approved here in the United States, and I'm not exactly sure because I haven't been able to find any precise details on what the Lend-Lease entails, but I have heard rumors that we may be preparing to send over some F-16s or F-15s, although I'm not sure what variation of each there are, but have y'all been getting that news as well?
Yes, yeah, we've heard that. We've heard about A-10s. And this is where I think my experience in Flight Simulator can be, you know, handy.
What kind of flight simulators have you used before?
Like Microsoft Flight Simulator and the most recent one that was published in 2020.
Classy right there. All right, that's pretty. You ever played DCS?
Yes, I did. I did play that game when it was just when it was called differently, and I think it was SU-27. It was a very old game, but then they built the DCS based on this game, I think.
Well, I gotta tell you, DCS is tough. And actually, one of the things that I used to do, and this was well before I even actually knew about Ukraine myself, this was years ago, is that when I would get in a game, and this is the weirdest coincidence, it has nothing to do with anything news-wise, but I think you'll find it funny. I would always want to play on the western side in the Georgian map, if you know the one I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And so I would always go through the camouflage because the only aircraft I knew how to fly was the SU-27 because it's the only one that had an in-game tutorial at that time out of the ones I owned. And so I had always picked the Ukrainian Air Force so that way I could fly with the Western forces in the game. And that was well before I actually like knew anything about Ukraine. I was like, oh, look, it's like a plane. And it had the same like, you know, livery and everything that the SU-27s have now. And that was kind of weird to me with the whole war breaking out that was kind of like an odd coincidence that even back then I was picking the Ukrainian Air Force over the Russian Air Force in a way.
I think it's a sign, my friend.
It's a sign. It's a sign for sure. And it was like it was just weird. That's all I really know. It was crazy. But with that, we did see that ammo dump being destroyed, and of course, wonderful to see. And so we're now going to move on to the next bit of news from the Kharkiv area, where we can see an MTLB that was destroyed in the area. Of course, not to mitigate this loss, but an MTLB is pretty much, and I believe you can probably agree with me, Starsky, nothing more than an armored, well, lightly armored, tracked car, pretty much.
Yeah, that is true. You can pretty much destroy it using even basically like assault rifles.
Yeah, I mean, like, it really, honestly, it's crazy to me that the Russians are using these in large numbers because the American equivalent to this kind of armored personnel carrier is the M113. And while we're sending those over to y'all right now, it looks like they're not going to be used in frontline roles like the Russians are using these MTLBs.
Yeah, you only gotta use APCs in order to deliver your troops, not participate in a fight. For example, we've had those BTR-3 vehicles, and I was a commander of such a vehicle when I was a sergeant. And yeah, we are the one. We are only allowed to use such vehicles to deliver our troops and use our weapons like rarely when we like have to. For example, there on the side of its combat module, you can see 2 laser-guided missiles. And actually, this BTR-3 has quite powerful weapons, like 30mm cannon. It has automatic grenade launcher, machine gun, and 2 laser-guided missiles called Barrier. They have tandem warheads, that which means that they can penetrate dynamic armor of Russian tanks. But still, we, in case we can avoid combat as much as possible on these specific APCs, we should do that because we have to save our troops.
Very interesting. And that's actually interesting to know that you have some armored personnel carrier experience under your belt. I actually didn't know that. And I don't think a lot of the viewers may have known that as well. Hopefully they did, though. And so with that, we've actually covered all of the news here in this Kharkiv area. We haven't gotten any news out of the what seems to be an ongoing counterattack here near Paramoha. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that correct. Sorry to everyone, including Starsky, if I am mispronouncing the village names. I'm not really good with them. But Starsky did give me a pass well before the stream to butcher the words. So thank God he did, or else I feel terrible. But we haven't gotten any news about the counterattack that's going on here. And a lack of news from what we've been able to tell tells us two things. One, the Russians can't upload any videos because things are going poorly enough for them that there's nothing to really talk about on their side. And we always know that a lack of video evidence from the Ukrainian side suggests that they're actually making ground and they're not willing to show where they've made ground yet. So we'll, of course, be watching that front line with bated breath and waiting for more news on it. And so with that, we're now going to move even further on down the front. We haven't gotten any news near the area around Chuhiv and also Pichini. And now that Starsky's here, I'm busting out laughing because I know I'm butchering every single pronunciation here. And he's probably just like, he's like probably like red over there and see because it's so badly pronounced. But we're now going to move further down to Izium. And we've heard some news, although I haven't been able to confirm, maybe Starsky can confirm for me, that 22,000 or 20,000 Russian troops may have been encircled in the area of Izium by Ukrainian forces.
We are very, how can I say that? We are very cautious before we make such statements. For example, like a month ago near Irpin, we could make such statement because the Russian army was in fact encircled. They were in a, like we say in Ukraine, in an operative encirclement, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so yes, in this case, we are going to wait for confirmation from our headquarters, but I think it's pretty much possible. We're trying to do as much as we can to improve our forces and reinforce our positions in order to encircle them. So I will keep my eye on this, and I think that we have a chance to bring back our territory in this area and capture as much of their troops as we can.
Well, hopefully that is the case. Of course, we don't know that here on the stream either, although it's been circling around the rumors in a way. And so we have not adjusted on the map to show this encirclement either. So it's good to know that y'all don't have any confirmed information about that as well. And so, of course, I guess you and me will be waiting to see if that news is ever confirmed to be true. And hopefully it is, because that would be one of the largest encirclements of the war so far, I believe.
Another one supposed to be in near Irpin, between Irpin and Makarov. But yeah, Russians were able to leave a corridor to retreat back to Chernobyl area and back to Belarus. But here, I think, yeah, they don't have chance. Well, okay, I'm still I'm trying to be very cautious with statements like that. So we will see. We're going to wait for confirmation.
All right, and so with that, we're now going to move into the news in the Izium area, where we can see that a Ukrainian drone, particularly, I believe, a Bayraktar, hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly. That one's a really tough one for me to pronounce, everyone, so just don't worry about it. It's probably going to be butchered forever. But we can see that the Ukrainian drone managed to take out a large amount of supplies and also equipment at this supposed motor pool near Izium. I'm not really sure if this was a motor pool or a place where the Russians had already consigned these vehicles to death, but it looks like they're now going to be taken out for sure. And of course, by them being dug-in positions in small little dugouts and putting the vehicles in each one, it does show that this is most likely an active motor pool, which makes this all the much better, considering that these trucks, it seems, are being wiped out. And I'm not really sure how much you've watched of my stream, Starsky. Of course, you're incredibly busy. And so, you don't, of course, have the luxury of just watching my streams at 5 o'clock in the morning, every morning over there. But would you consider logistical vehicles being destroyed more important than, say, actual combat forces?
Of course, because, for example, even during first weeks, I'd say even first days of this invasion, we made a lot of finds on the front line. For example, a lot of tanks that lacked fuel. So we're not sure either whether Russian crew, for example, would empty the tanks like themselves in order to avoid combat, or whether they were poorly supplied with fuel on the first place. So yeah, pretty much without fuel, and this is like basis of our strategy here. Pretty much without fuel, all of their tanks, all of their vehicles are useless. Okay, and we are putting all of our efforts in order to disrupt their supply lines and their logistics, of course.
Interesting. That's something that we've been thinking about on this channel as well. Of course, my premise has always been that destroying a truck is much more important than destroying a tank. Because if you, of course, stop a Russian soldier from eating or having enough gas to operate their tanks or APCs, that usually means that they're done for anyways, and you don't even have to fight them outright. But with that, we're now going to move on to the next bit of news from the Izium area, where we see that Ukrainian artillery was mercilessly pounding Russian positions in this area today. As we can see here in this video. Let me make sure to put this up and also make sure it's unmuted. But here you can see Ukrainian artillery about to level Russian positions again. Of course, I have high standards for the Ukrainians. I'm sure that this hit dead on the mark because we've never seen Ukrainian artillery miss as far as the video evidence has gone.
Ёбана в рот, блядь.
And so with that, the video loops, but one hell of a show by the Ukrainians. Of course, the artillery is one of the shining examples of the Ukrainian military that we've seen. They have mastered pinpoint fire by the artillery, and I believe that they will be further helped with their goal of perfectly precise artillery strikes now that they've gotten the M777 and they're also getting a large supply of guided munitions along with it. With that, we're now going to move a little bit further down the line, and we're going to go to the area around Losov. I believe is how that's pronounced, where we can see
Lozove.
Losova?
Lozove.
Lozove.
Yeah.
All right, good. So we can see here that a Ukrainian monastery was destroyed. Now, I think that Starsky, considering that he is a Ukrainian and he knows a lot more about Ukrainian culture than me, can kind of explain the significance, and I'm sure that you can see this on screen. I'm not going to try and pronounce that. I know that that would be terrible, but I'm kind of like covering it with my mouse cursor right here, and maybe you could tell them the significance of this monastery.
Yeah, so Lavra is in Ukraine, we have a bunch of them. Lavra is basically a complex of churches, and they have a significant historical importance. So we have Lavra in Kiev, in Pochayev, it's on the very west of Ukraine, and one here in Svyatogorsk. And yeah, it's crazy because I remember that I've been to this place myself like 10 years ago. And what's interesting about this very complex is that it belonged to Russian church in Ukraine.
Really?
Yeah, Russia. We call it Moscow Patriarchate. So it was like part of Russian church in Ukraine.
And so they're destroying pretty much their own churches in a way. I guess you could say culturally, not really ownership-wise, maybe.
Yeah.
Wow, that's nuts. I didn't actually know that. But that's pretty crazy to me. And of course, it's very sad to see cultural sites being destroyed because, of course, once a site's destroyed, you're never going to get it back. And so that's, of course, unfortunate to see. I hope that the Ukrainians will manage to maybe rebuild that monastery in the future. Because, of course, they are wonderful cultural sites, and they're very pretty architecturally, and also serve a very important purpose religiously. With that, we're now going to move down to a video that Starsky's probably waiting for me to show all night on stream. He actually provided this video to me, and it actually is from his unit, if I am correct.
Yes, you are correct. That's Rapid Response Brigade of National Guard of Ukraine.
And so here we can see them with of course the famous Stugna. Everyone on this channel knows how effective the Stugna has been according to our video evidence, which is dead on accurate, and we can see it being used by the Starsky's unit today to take out a BMP-1. And so of course I thank Starsky very much for the video. I actually did not see this anywhere trying to comb through the internet to find my videos today. And so we can see that another Russian armored personnel carrier, a BMP-1, has been taken out. BMP-1s are a little bit more archaic than the BMP-2, and of course, dated compared to the BMP-3, but they do pack a decent punch with a 76mm gun, and some of them are actually able to mount anti-tank guided missiles on them of a certain kind. I have seen one before near the Kyiv area with a Concours mounted onto it, but I'm not sure if all of them have been equipped with that at this point. But of course, it's great to see that Starsky's own unit is still inflicting massive damage on the Russian units in the Rubizhny area. And maybe Starsky would like to add a little bit of comment for his men down there doing wonderful work.
Yeah, of course. BMPs are great, I mean, in combat. Well, that's the difference between, for example, BMP and BTR, right? Because BTR is a transport vehicle, it's a carrier, and BMP is a battle infantry machine. So yeah, it's widely used in combat, and it's quite effective because it has low profile. It's not as big as BTR, for example, because BTR is has pretty high silhouette. It's pretty big, and yeah, we are using Tuknas. We also have javelins. And in one of the vids that we have posted on, I think I have it on my channel as well. It's an interview from hell. So there's an interview with an anti-tank guy who has javelins, and he operates javelins in Rubizhny specifically. Yeah, and we are very efficient in using our anti-tank missiles. As for Stugna, I've been to this training like a couple of years ago. So all those guys that are currently using this Stugna in the field, they were trained by developers of this weapon, and they arrived to our training ground, and they trained our Stugna operators. So I have this video, but unfortunately it's only in Ukrainian. Maybe I will translate it for you. Important thing about Stugna is that you can literally put this missile into a window which is as big as 20 by 20 centimeters, if you are a good operator, which is crazy. So you basically can use this not only against their tanks and their vehicles, but you can also use it to destroy their troops that are hiding inside of some kind of fortification, for example.
Interesting. That's something that we've known a little bit on stream, but we actually didn't know. I don't think a lot of the viewers knew, and I think we talked about this a little bit before stream, but I didn't know until today that the developers of the Stugna system actually helped out in training units and using it. And with that, we're actually going to return to the questions, because I remember we absolutely neglected that and just started meandering down the front line. And so, Matthew, what is the next question we got?
Okay, Enforcer, before we move on to recognizing donors and also moving back to the questions, we have hit $29,000 on our fundraiser. Absolutely insane numbers. We're already at 29,000. It's only 11:40 Eastern, so we're doing so great on the donations. Thank you, everybody, for your donations. I know I asked earlier if everybody put in a $5 donation to the fundraiser, we could reach our goal much quicker. Everybody did, and we immediately jumped up to like 25,000. And we've now jumped up to 29,000 cents. So thank you to everybody, small or large donations. We appreciate them all, excuse me. And with that being said, I'm going to recognize some of our top donors. So first up, we are back with Zeta Lane putting in a $500 donation. Thank you very much, Zeta.
Welcome back, Zeta Lane. We've been wondering where you've been, and it's good to see you back, and it is good to see you putting in support on the Sunday night fundraiser. And I thank you so much, and I hope you've been all right, and I hope you're back to stay. So thank you so much for coming back. And with that, we'll let Matthew get back to recognizing everyone else.
And back to the recognition, we have a $250 donation from Nurse Without Borders, which is a pretty cool username considering our fundraisers for Doctors Without Borders. So thank you very much. We have a $250 donation from Will Riley, a $200 donation from Panama, and several other donations here. We have a $200 donation from Vern, a $150 donation from Glenda Carson, and then we have several $100 donations. We have one from Joni Two Shoes, Bob P, Mark Sova, and Christina Centauri. So thank you all. And I'm seeing the donations are just rolling in very, very fast. So that is actually all the big ones I can recognize at the moment, Enforcer. So I am ready for questions when you are.
All right. And so with that, let's get to the next question.
All right. And since we are paid a visit by Zeta Lane again, I'm going to get to that question first. Zeta Lane says, Enforcer, this is a question for Operator Starsky. What would it take to push the Russians out of Kherson? Is this a priority?
It's one of our priorities at this point, because we know that Russians are developing their attack through Kherson. They want to get Mykolaiv, and they want to also get Odessa. We know that they want to close that corridor between Donbass and Crimea, which they kind of did, and they want to get south of Ukraine as well, because it's important. Odessa is an important seaport, huge trading city, and yeah, they need that badly. And Kherson is very important for us, because through Kherson we can develop our counter-attack on Crimea. And it will be quite hard to liberate Crimea, because for that we need to have a lot of fleet, and Russians currently have that fleet that is able to help Russian troops that are kept in Crimea with this fleet's fire. And what it takes, well, we are currently developing our counterattack near Kherson. It takes some time, because it's an ongoing counterattack for already like couple of weeks. Again, we can't talk much about it, and because again, we are very cautious with, our statements, but we will talk after we have some kind of specific results that we can make public.
Well, that's interesting to hear. And also, I was just wanting to make sure because there's been rumors that a naval invasion would occur near Odessa at some point. But as far as I was able to find, based off of what I was able to see, and also video evidence and combing around, it appears that the Russians were trying to secure some kind of land route towards Odessa to start with, and then the naval invasion would have most likely been conducted where those naval forces then met up with the land forces, so that way there was an actual way to supply the units that would be near Odessa. Is that somewhat correct based off the information you've gotten, or is there something that may be amiss there?
Yes, you are correct.
Oh, all right, so just making sure, because one thing, because now you're here and you're also in the Ukrainian military. One thing I want to see is if I'm actually saying stuff that's been correct on here. And so it's good to know that I have been for the most part. And so with that, we're going to answer one more question, and then we're actually going to start moving down the Donbass area and down towards the southern front as well and start covering the news there. And so with that, what's the next question?
And real quick, let me give a shout out to Eskimo, who puts in a $500 donation. Thank you very much, good sir. That is very, very helpful to the fundraiser. Next up, we have a question from a channel regular, Will Riley. He says, Enforcer and Operator Starsky, my company was in Chernobyl training people in dry cask storage and our welding system. Did the Russians vandalize the storage canisters? They are the big green cans.
I'm not sure because I haven't been to Chernobyl area yet. I hope that I will, and I will make sure to check it out for you.
All right, and with that, I don't really know a lot about specifics like that. Of course, I focus on the larger picture, so unfortunately, Will Riley, I cannot answer that question. But Matthew, am I correct in remembering that Will Riley is always the Dick Cheney joke guy?
Yes, you are correct.
All right, so just in case you don't know, Starsky, while we move and set up for the next bit of news here, Will Riley is always making jokes about Dick Cheney. There's a lot of running jokes that we have here on the stream, and also I've seen a bit of a new one popping up because I actually misspoke at the beginning of the stream when you were introduced and said you were Enforcer Starsky, not Operator Starsky, and I've seen some people in the comments now wanting you to be called Enforcer Starsky. So, with that in mind, would you like the honorary title of Enforcer Starsky?
Yeah, sounds great. I think that I deserved a T-shirt with Enforcer Starsky. Yeah.
You know what?
Yeah,
Matthew, that's actually
right.
a really good idea.
He's right. We need to send him one.
Yes, we're actually gonna custom make one for you and send it to you because that would actually be pretty neat. And if you actually wore that on video, you know what? You know it'd be nah, that's getting too ambitious. But we will definitely send you a shirt for sure, and we're going to make sure we get one over to you as soon as possible. And so with that, we're now going to move beyond Rubizhny. We have not gotten any news today in terms of video evidence from Lysychansk or Severodonetsk, so unfortunately we cannot report on that, although we do know that there is currently ongoing fighting there. We just don't know exactly what's happened there yet. So we're now going to move further down the front line towards the town of Poposna. Unfortunately, it appears that the marker I put here earlier in the day was deleted, but we do have information that the Katarovite Chechens, I want to make sure to say that because Starsky actually made it clear to me before the stream, there's actually a large group of Chechens living in Ukraine, and he also clarified that on stream too, so I want to make sure to differentiate those Chechens from the Katarovites, so that way they're not disgraced by the latter. So with that, in Poposna today, Ukrainian forces have withdrawn from the city due to it largely being destroyed, and the Chechens, the Katarovite Chechens, as well as the pro-Russian forces there, have claimed that they've managed to push the Ukrainians out. As far as we know, they've moved to more defensible positions, and I do have to say that either way we look at this, whether the Russians actually managed to push the Ukrainians out through sheer force, or if the Ukrainians retreat to better positions, this is still a marginal Pyrrhic victory for the amount of forces that the Russians have had to lose to just take this one small area on the front line. So really, honestly, it doesn't even matter to me if the Russian story, the Russian spin on this is true, because the Ukrainians have managed to hold pretty much an entire front line here in the southeast for over 2 weeks at this point with hardly any changes on the front. So I've got to say, you've got to give it to the Ukrainians again for putting up such a staunch resistance, such a staunch defense to the Russian offensive, and that they've only managed to withdraw from Poposna over 2 weeks into it. So got to hand it to them, even though this is a bit of unfortunate sounding news. Once again, Poposna is a smaller town with only a population of 19,000 people. It's not as major as, say, Kherson or Kharkiv or Kyiv or any of those cities. We're now going to move further on down the Luhansk region, where we've seen the Su-25s have been sighted in operation over the Luhansk area today. So here's that video. Not really much to explain here. Hopefully they will be shot down incredibly soon, because we know that the Ukrainian air defenses are pretty much putting the entire airspace on lockdown for the large part. We're now going to move past the Svitlodarsk area, where we've gotten a lot of news on the 30th Infantry Brigade, and we're now going to move into the area of Orlivka, hopefully I'm pronouncing that correct, where rockets hit Ukrainian positions in the Donbass. Of course, I try and show all footage, but then again, one thing I would always like to say before we start off any Russian footage is that they make up a lot of the stuff they film, and most of the time we never even see the supposed Ukrainian forces that they're firing at. But here is this video nonetheless. It's just so that way I can make sure that it is covered. We cover all war news on the channel that we possibly can. We can now hear the ATGM, a rocket that they fired, heading towards the Ukrainian position. But at the same time, in this whole entire video, I'm going to pause it here because the rest of it's just them doing the same thing. We never actually see Ukrainian forces in any of these videos. And one thing that Starsky, of course, can attest to is that whenever you watch a Ukrainian video of Ukrainians destroying Russian forces, you always see the Russian forces before they're actually destroyed. In Russian videos, on the other hand, you never see Ukrainian forces before they supposedly hit them or drop an airstrike on them. We never do. And so I hope that Starsky can back me up there in saying that most of the time, the Russians appear to be just wasting ammunition, and we never actually see the Ukrainian forces on film they're supposedly trying to target.
Yeah, that is true. I can confirm that, and also that's pretty much the reason why I don't show much videos of Russian troops destroyed on my channel, because it's being restricted all the time. So unfortunately, I can only share links. But yeah, this is pretty much true. We always show either vehicles or tanks or their troops being bombed specifically.
That's true, and that's something that I've noted as well, and a lot of the viewers on this stream have always noted that, and it's good to know that everyone always has a sharp eye out to see that the Russians usually fabricate the victories that they supposedly film, because we hardly ever see, or rarely at all ever see, Ukrainian forces on film, and the only time we did was in Mariupol with the Chechens, and then every time the Ukrainian forces were kind of on film, the Chechens were getting slaughtered. So with that, we're now going to move down the rest of the Donetsk. We have the Donetsk Oblast, I guess it should be called. We haven't gotten any news from the Avdiivka to Marinka area, so unfortunately we don't know how the fighting is progressing there, although we do know that the Ukrainians have managed to retake the village of Marinka, and so far there has been no more developments on this front line that we can report. So with that, we're now going to move further down and into Mariupol itself, where I believe this information may be correct, but I want to confirm that the last group of civilians have been evacuated from the Azovstal as of today or yesterday.
Yes, this is true, and news of yesterday in Ukraine, because yesterday in Ukraine was today in the United States. So the news of yesterday was that journalists made interview with a 4-year-old girl and her mother previously. They were hiding in that Azovstal in Mariupol, and yesterday that girl got evacuated from Mariupol without her mother, because her mother was taken by Russians to the filtration camp. So they made another fake evacuation corridor, and her mother was forcefully taken to Russia. So currently she's either being kept on on the uncontrolled territory of Donbass, or she's taken directly to Russia. So that girl, her name is Alisa, or Alice in English. So I think you can Google that information as well. She had to evacuate from Mariupol without her mom.
Well, that's sick.
Yeah.
Well, with that, we're now going to move on into the news from Mariupol itself, where we see that the Russians apparently didn't just try and also, speaking of which, I think that's actually a perfect time to go over a map that you sent to me right before the stream that shows that Ukrainian civilians have been sent to relocation camps in Russian territory. And according to satellite footage that has been provided to the Ukrainians and also to Western nations in general, it appears that we have a good idea of where these Ukrainians have wound up inside of Russia and the numbers of which in these camps. Of course, I have not been reporting on this a lot on this channel. Of course, there's not a lot of video evidence to back this up, so sadly, since I always use video evidence to back up what I'm talking about, I haven't been able to report on this, but Operator Starsky has been watching this with very good eye, and he knows a lot more about it than me, considering he's been apprised of the situation for quite some while. So could you maybe go into a little bit of depth about the extent of how many times the Russians have pretty much done the same strategy over and over of diverting Ukrainian citizens into Russia instead of towards Ukraine?
Well, there are a lot of cases. For example, when we exchange our POWs for Russian POWs, we receive a bunch of civilians together with those POWs, which wasn't, wasn't negotiated, but yeah, they send their like our Ukrainian civilians instead of our soldiers from time to time. We have information that, for example, from 2 to 6,000 people were already stolen, or kidnapped from Mariupol area and Zaporizhia, I think. So yeah, it happens over and over and over again. I think I told you already in one of my previous videos that I spoke to a friend of mine. His grandma lived in Mariupol, and she was kidnapped by Russians and brought to a filtration camp on the territory of Russia. And they took her fingerprints, even despite she's 83 years old. So you can imagine what those poor people are going through in those filtration camps, and they are actively searching for relatives of Ukrainian militaries and stuff like that. They're surfing through those victims' phones and gadgets in order to find some information regarding their connection with Ukrainian militaries. So yeah, that is crazy. What we see here is actually a war crime because forceful deportation of people that live at the territory of a country to another country, specifically your country, because it's kidnapping. So that's military crime.
Interesting. We did have a generally good idea that it was a military crime, but I didn't actually know how far of an extent that the Russians had actually committed to this, and it appears that they're even sending them to far-flung areas of the country, which is interesting to me because the fact that they're having so many logistical issues in Ukraine, you would think that they would not go through the effort of sending 306 Ukrainians to the Vostok camp near Vladivostok, but yet they have, and that's really bizarre to me. And I guess you could say that kind of shows how crazy the Russians are, is that they'll not even properly supply their forces that are currently fighting in Ukraine, yet they'll still manage to send 306 Ukrainians all the way to Vladivostok on the far eastern side of the country. And so with that, we're now going to move back into Mariupol and cover some of the news, and then we're going to address a couple of more questions. Starting off, once again, we can see that the Russians not only are forcibly deporting civilians from the Mariupol area and other occupied areas of the country, but they actually looted storage units in the Mariupol area. In Ukraine, it appears that these are called garages, but here in the United States, the exact same thing are called storage units. So,
Как тут резали эти изверги? Вонючие, блин.
So here we see in the clip something that you would find in the United States. Apparently the Russians cut straight through the lock to this garage and then opened it and went into it and started looting everything inside of it.
Наконец-то его вскрыли, вот, блин. Это ж, ой-ой-ой-ой-ой. Ты посмотри, как тут ломали, блин, изверги. Как тут изверги ломали. Смотри. Смотри, что творили, блин. Ты говорил, не откроют, блин. Такие изверги все откроют. Там, блин, уже написано Ахмат сила. Мы знаем, кто здесь был. Кто здесь был и все разворовал. Полюбуйтесь, блин. Все вывезли.
Ахмат не сила.
Не сила? Да. Ну, хер его знает. Сила, не сила, колеса даже на машину забрали. Вон, соседский гараж горит. Причем не попадание, скорее всего, подожгли. Не знаю.
Это поджог.
Это поджог. Подожгли. Поворовали, повскрывали. И теперь они вот что сделали. Вот, каждый гараж, каждый гараж скрытый. И все вынесено. Все нафиг вынесено. Каждый гараж.
And so with that, we can see that the Russians pretty much looted an entire storage unit, every single stall in the storage unit, to try and get something out of it that they can bring home. We know that the Russians, even when wounded, don't really get a lot of compensation for their service, such as the picture, the famous picture at this point, where the guy's got 2 bags of buckwheat, some sunflower seed oil, and a postcard from Putin. And it kind of gives you the idea that the Russians may actually be looting to this extent because they're not even really getting paid anymore. And also, to kind of further down on that, although that doesn't make what they're doing excusable, but still, in the incident of the Moskva, we know that several hundred of the crew members have been killed, and you'll see why I'm laughing here in a second about this, but a couple of hundred of the crew members have been killed, and the Russians still insist that it was nothing more than an accident, although we know that the Moskva was hit by 2 Neptune anti-ship missiles. So, as of just a few days ago, they actually declared to all of the family members of the dead crew members of the Moskva that they would not be giving them the dead soldiers' compensation because they deemed it to be an accident and those soldiers weren't actually killed in combat. So they're actually screwing over their own citizens again, much like they screwed them over with the Kursk incident back in 2000. With that, we can now see a clip of a video from the bunkers inside of the Azovstal, where you can see that there's apparently been a roof cave-in inside of one of these bunkers from some kind of bomb explosion. We're not really sure the extent of the damage. It appears that a decent cave-in has occurred, but we can see sunlight coming in from above. So there may be a way around this blockage, but there may not be. Hopefully they can find a way to make it through this blockage if there are people on the other side. And of course, we know that the position in the Azovstal is a little rough right now. The Russians have breached the defensive perimeter, and hopefully the Azov, along with the 36th Infantry Brigade, can stabilize the situation once more and continue to hold the Azovstal and tie up precious time and resources on the Russians' part. With that, we're now going to move into the last bit of news in the Mariupol area, where we can see evidence of mass graves once again, which have become a normal sight in formerly occupied and currently occupied Russian territory. So here's the video of that, and it speaks for itself. And of course, every single time you see graves like this, it is just more and more evidence of Russian war crimes. You don't even have to see them on film to know the results of what they've been doing. Every single time you see a helicopter from the Russian side flying at treetop level and then quickly tilt up and fire off its entire inventory of rockets, that is what the end result is these masses of graves. Those rockets, and that's just one particular instance, the Russians have a million ways to go after and kill civilians directly. But every single time those rockets are fired, because of the range they're being fired at, they have a massive spread. And so for most of the times, those rockets are landing over a massive area and usually directly on civilian areas and civilian infrastructure and killing dozens, if not several, if not around 100 people each time. I mean, like, you know, not each time. The Kramatorsk attack was one of the worst. It wasn't even conducted with a helicopter. It was conducted by a ballistic missile. But in that one instance, 50 people were killed. We know in the Mariupol theater bombing, around 600 people have been killed. And we keep on seeing this over and over and over. And the Russians almost seem, and they definitely are, they're deliberately targeting civilian shelters and infrastructure, trying to incite fear. And also, it seems, although this is, of course, an extreme statement to make, but it seems most logical at this point, that they are almost trying to actively exterminate the Ukrainians and treat them like pests in their own land. And so hopefully Western countries, which have been giving a much larger degree of support now than they have been in the past, will continue to step up and try and give as much help as possible to the Ukrainians in the struggle for survival at this point. And the Ukrainians, even at this point, are doing an incredibly good job at fighting the Russians and pushing them back. We're now going to move to the area of Kherson itself, where we can see the Russians scared to death. And I know that Starsky's going to get a great laugh out of this one, because this was hilarious. We can actually see that a man inside of his apartment began to whistle, much like a bomb falling, you know, from the sky. And the Russians down here around this truck freaked out and started running once they actually heard this guy's whistle. So I'm going to let this video play and just everyone take a look at this. This is about the funniest thing you can ever see and about how scared the Russians actually are. And there they go. They're off. They're off to the races. They're running all the way back to Belgorod at this point. And so with that, what did you think about that, Starsky?
That's not funny, man. That's not funny, because everybody, some bastard starts whistling like that. I cannot express what I feel, because, for example, we have those, like, near our base, we are using those signal rockets. Okay, so whenever you touch that cord, it just shoots off and it starts whistling. So every time it whistles, you gotta run and hide somewhere, because you know, we all know that this sound is dangerous. So yeah, and it's just a signal rocket, you know. So yeah, but it was funny in a way.
Yeah, that's true. But still, at the same time, I gotta say, the Russians, you know, because you, of course, you compared the videos and contrast them probably to how the Russians react versus Ukrainians, but the Russians are always running. Like, whenever anything happens around them, no matter what, I mean, like, it could just be something in the distance, like a twig breaking, and they're taking off. Like, they're leaving the vehicles, they're leaving their guns, their food, and everything. They're just running. And the Ukrainians, from what I've seen on film, don't do that at all, or hardly at all, from what I've seen. And usually they actually stay much more calm and collected during situations like this, instead of just trying to run.
That is true. We don't have nowhere to run, you know.
That's true.
We have nowhere to retreat.
That's true, and I guess that would most likely lead to, of course, the Ukrainians being much more brave and actually facing it down instead of just being like the Russians and turning around and running off. And with that, we're now going to move to Snake Island, where we've had two more interesting occurrences happen here over the past day. Snake Island has actually been a place that has been the result of a lot of Russian tears and losses, although at the beginning of the war, we saw that 7 of the 13 men on Snake Island pretty much martyred themselves in the defense of the country. And although Snake Island is really just a lighthouse on a rock, making sure that ships don't run into it, they still stood their ground and meant that no inch of Ukrainian land would fall without a fight. And so now we can see that the Russians apparently have picked up a curse from this, as over the past week nearly, we've seen Russian unit after Russian unit and vehicle after vehicle being destroyed here on Snake Island. And this has been no different today, as we've seen a Bayraktar drone take out an Mi-8 on Snake Island. So let's take a look at this video. As we can see the Mi-8 here, we can see the troops unloading from the helicopter. And now we can see it being hit. It doesn't look like that one will be able to have insurance collected on it. And so now we can see it burning. We don't really know the condition of the troops that were getting out of that helicopter, because the explosion and the subsequent burning of the helicopter is so bright we can no longer see them on the thermal imaging system. But you can see that a massive fire has broken out on Snake Island from this Mi-8 being hit. So once again, the Ukrainians are making sure that the Russians never get away easily with taking Snake Island, now that we know that the Moskva, which was one of the main ships that approached Snake Island during the beginning of the war, has been sunk. It appears that there's been a massive curse placed on this island. And you all may remember the video yesterday of the landing craft being stricken at its moorings at Snake Island and the fast attack boat that was sitting behind it. We actually got a video today of that fast attack boat promptly being destroyed just hours after that video came out. So I'm going to let y'all see this. And this is, of course, something. We know that there's only about 3 or 4 of these fast attack boats in the Black Sea Fleet, and we can actually see another one of them being destroyed here. And at this point, I believe that brings the total up to 4 fast attack boats that have been destroyed on film. And with that in mind, that means that maybe the entire fast attack boat force of the Black Sea Fleet has been destroyed at this point. Hopefully this doesn't have copyright music. So we can now see the footage of Bayraktar and also Snake Island as well. And now we can see the footage of this fast attack boat moving through the water. Now we can see the infrared camera from the Bayraktar, and we can now see that the Bayraktar has hit it with some kind of guided munition, most likely disabling the boat and most likely leading it to sink.
Yeah, and if I can add a couple of words.
Sure.
So regarding that video with their helicopter, so even despite the fact that that video was published on the Facebook page of our headquarters of our armed forces, even despite the fact that it's a video made in Ukraine, and even despite the fact that this UAV has specific interface, very specific for Bayraktar, right? So Russians claim that it's their UAV destroying Ukrainian airborne troops that landed on the Snake Island. And I've seen like a lot of posts of that yesterday in different Russian communities and publics, and even at some point their Telegram community of their Wagner group stated that no, guys, those airborne troops are our troops, and they were actually killed by Ukrainian UAV.
Oh, well, you know, that's really sick. Honestly, it's hilarious that the Russians try and spin stories so bad that they'll even say that their own soldiers are not theirs in the attempt to try and make it look like they're winning. But that's really sick of them, honestly, to really just take all of those soldiers that were probably killed there, just swipe them under the rug, and then switch the title of the video to Russians destroy the Ukrainians on Snake Island. That's kind of bizarre, actually.
Yeah, they don't care at all.
Apparently they don't. And so with that, we're now going to move. Let me make sure I have no international news left. It appears that we have made it through all of the news for today. And so we're now going to round off this stream with our usual outro that we've now adopted as the standard format. And we're now going to have the speech with President Zelensky played in its entirety. There is a speech-to-text translation on the bottom of the video, and then once that is over, we will once again go back to questions and answers from both me and Operator Starsky. So, without further ado, here is the Victory Day address, considering that today is Victory Day for Ukraine and also the rest of the Western world, and I'm going to let that video play. It's rather long, so please bear with it, but it's an incredibly good speech.
Чи може стати чорно-білою весна? Чи буває вічний лютий? Чи знецінюються золоті слова? На жаль, Україна знає відповіді на всі ці запитання. На жаль, ці відповіді – так. Щороку, 8 травня, разом з усім цивілізованим світом ми вшановуємо кожного, хто захищав планету від нацизму у роки Другої світової війни. Мільйони втрачених життів, скалічених доль, закатованих душ і мільйони причин, щоб сказати злу ніколи знову. Ми знали ціну, яку сплатили за цю мудрість наші предки. Знали, як важливо вберегти її та передати нащадкам. Але і гадки не мали, що наше покоління буде свідком наруги над словами, що, як виявилось, є істиною далеко не для всіх. Цьогоріч ми кажемо ніколи знову інакше. Ми чуємо ніколи знову інакше. Це звучить болісно, жорстоко, без оклику, а зі знаком питання. Ви кажете ніколи знову? Розкажіть про це Україні. 24 лютого слово «ніколи» стерли. Розстріляли, розбомбили сотнями ракет о 4-й ранку, якими розбудили всю Україну. Ми почули моторошні вибухи. Ми почули знову. Місто Бородянка – одна із багатьох жертв цього злочину. Позаду мене один із багатьох свідків. Не військовий об'єкт, не секретна база, а проста 9-поверхівка. Чи може вона нести безпекову загрозу для РФ, для 1/8 частини суші, Другої армії світу, ядерної держави? Чи може бути щось більш безглуздим, ніж це запитання? Може. 250-кілограмові фугасні бомби, якими сверхдержава засипала це маленьке містечко, і воно оніміло. Воно не може сьогодні сказати ніколи знову. Воно не може сьогодні нічого сказати. Але тут усе зрозуміло без слів. Просто погляньте на цей будинок. Колись тут були стіни, колись на них були фото, а на фото були ті, хто колись пройшов пекло війни. 500 чоловіків, яких відправили в Німеччину на примусові роботи. Ті, хто згорів заживо, коли нацисти спалили тут понад 100 хатин. 250 бійців, які загинули на фронтах Другої світової війни, та загалом майже 1000 жителів Бородянки, які боролись і перемогли нацизм. Щоб ніколи знову. Бились за майбутнє дітей, за життя, яке було тут до 24 лютого. Уявіть, як в кожній з цих квартир люди лягали спати. Бажають один одному на добраніч, вимикають світло, обіймають коханих, заплющують очі, мріють про щось. Настає повна тиша. Вони всі засинають, не знаючи, що не всі прокинуться. Вони міцно сплять, їм сниться щось приємне, та через кілька годин їх розбудять. Розбудять вибухи ракет, а хтось не прокинеться більше ніколи. Ніколи знову. З цього гасла виконали слово «ніколи». Ампутували під час так званої спецоперації. Встромили ніж у серце і, дивлячись в очі, сказали «это не ми». Закатували зі словами «не все так однозначно». Вбили ніколи, знову сказавши «можем повторить». Так і сталося. І потвори почали повтори. І наші міста, які пережили страшну окупацію настільки, що 80 років мало, щоб про неї забути, знов побачили окупанта. І отримали другу дату окупації у своїй історії. А деякі, як, наприклад, Маріуполь, третю. За 2 роки окупації нацисти вбили в ньому 10 тисяч мирних людей. За 2 місяці окупації РФ вбила 20 тисяч. Через десятиліття після Другої світової темрява повернулась в Україну, і вона знову стала чорно-білою. Знову зло повернулось, знову. В іншій формі, під іншими гаслами, але з тією ж метою. В Україні влаштували криваву реконструкцію нацизму. Фанатичне наслідування цьому режиму, його ідеям, діям, словам і символам. Маніакальне до деталей. Відтворення його звірств та алібі, що начебто надають злу священну мету. Повторення його злочинів. І навіть спроби перевершити вчителя та посунути його з п'єдесталу найбільшого зла в історії людства. Встановити новий світовий рекорд з ксенофобії, ненависті, расизму і числа жертв, до якого вони можуть призвести. Ніколи знову це була ода людини розумної, гімн цивілізованого світу, але хтось сфальшивив, спотворив ніколи знову нотами сумніву, заглушив, розпочавши свою смертельну арію зла. І це зрозуміло всім країнам, які побачили жахи нацизму на власні очі. А сьогодні відчувають моторошне дежавю. Бачать знову. Всі народи, яких клеймили третім сортом, рабами, без права на власну державу, чи взагалі на існування, чують заяви, які підносять одну націю, а інші з легкістю викреслюють. Кажуть, що вас насправді не існує, ви штучно створені, а отже безправні. Всі чують мову зла. Знову. І разом визнають болючу правду. Ми не протримались навіть століття. Нашого never again вистачило на 77 років. Ми прогавили зло, воно відродилось знову і зараз. Again and now. Це розуміють всі країни і всі народи, які сьогодні підтримують Україну. І попри нову маску звіра впізнали його, бо на відміну від декого пам'ятають, за що і проти чого боролись наші предки. Не переплутали перше з другим, не поміняли їх місцями, не забули поляки, на землі яких нацисти почали свій марш і зробили перший постріл Другої світової війни. Не забули, як спочатку зло тебе звинувачує, провокує, називає агресором, а потім нападає. О 4:45 і каже, що це самозахист. І вони бачили, як це повторилось на нашій землі. Вони пам'ятають зруйновані нацистами Варшаву і бачать, що зробили з Маріуполем. Не забули британці, як нацисти стирали з лиця землі Ковентрі, який бомбили 41 раз. Як звучала місячна соната від Люфтваффе, коли по місту безперервно гатили 11 годин. Як зруйнували його історичний центр, фабрики, собор Святого Михаїла. І вони бачили, як ракетами били по Харкову, як спотворили його історичний центр, заводи і Свято-Успенський собор. Вони пам'ятають, як Лондон бомбили 57 ночей поспіль, як ФАУ падали на Белфаст, Портсмут, Ліверпуль. І бачать, як прилітають крилаті ракети в Миколаїв, Краматорськ, Чернігів. Пам'ятають, як гатили по Бірмінгему. І бачать, як дістається його місту-побратиму Запоріжжя. Це пам'ятають нідерландці, як Роттердам став першим містом, що зазнало тотального знищення, коли нацисти скинули на нього 97 тонн бомб. Це пам'ятають французи, пам'ятають Орадур, Сюрглан, де есесівці спалили заживо 5000 жінок і дітей. Масові повішення в Тюлі, різанина в селищі Аск, багатотисячна акція спротиву в окупованому Лілі. Вони бачили, що зробили в Бучі, Ірпені, Бородянці, Волновасі, Тростянці. Вони бачать, як окупували Херсон, Мелітополь, Бердянськ та інші наші міста, у яких люди не здаються і виходять багатотисячні мирні акції, які не під силу окупанту, і все, що вони можуть, лише стріляти по мирним людям. Це не забули і чехи, як за менше ніж за добу нацисти знищили Лідиці, залишивши від селища суцільне попелище. Вони бачили, як знищили Попасну. Від неї не лишилось навіть попелище. Не забули греки, які пережили масові вбивства і розстріли на всій території, блокаду і великий голод. Про це пам'ятають американці, які бились зі злом на два фронти які пройшли Перл-Харбор і Дюнкерк разом із союзниками, і всі ми разом проходимо нові, не менш складні битви. Це пам'ятають всі, хто пережив Голокост. Як один народ може сильно ненавидіти інший. Це не забули литовці, латвійці, естонці, данці, грузини, вірмени, бельгійці, норвежці та ще багато інших. Всіх, хто постраждав від нацизму на своїй землі. І всі, хто переміг його у складі антигітлерівської коаліції. На жаль, є ті, хто, переживши всі ці злочини, втративши мільйони людей, які боролися за перемогу і здобули її, сьогодні осквернив пам'ять про них та їхній подвиг. Той, хто дозволив обстрілювати зі своєї землі міста України, які поруч з нашими предками звільняли і його предки. Той, хто плюнув у обличчя своєму безсмертному полку, поставивши поруч з ним катів із Бучі, і кинув виклик всьому людству, але забув про головне. Будь-яке зло завжди закінчується однаково. Воно закінчується. Дорогі українці, сьогодні у День пам'яті та примирення ми вклоняємось перед усіма, хто захищав рідну землю і світ від нацизму. Ми відзначаємо подвиг українського народу та його внесок у перемогу антигітлерівської коаліції. Вибухи, постріли, окопи, поранення, голод, бомбардування, блокади, масові розстріли, каральні операції, окупації, концтабори, газові камери, жовті зірки, гетто, Бабин Яр, Хатинь, полон, примусові роботи. Вони загинули за те, щоб кожен із нас знав, що означають ці поняття з книжок, а не з власного досвіду. Але сталося інакше. Це несправедливо перед ними усіма. Але правда переможе, і ми все подолаємо. І доказ цьому має назву Вервольф. Це колишня ставка і бункер Гітлера біля Вінниці. І все, що від неї залишилось, декілька каменів, руїни, розвалини того, хто вважав себе величним і непереможним. Це дороговказ усім нам і майбутнім поколінням. Те, за що боролись наші предки. І довели. Жодне зло не уникне відповідальності. Не зможе сховатись в бункері. Від нього не лишиться каменя на камені. Тож ми все подолаємо, і ми знаємо це точно, бо наші військові і всі наші люди – нащадки тих, хто подолав нацизм. Тож переможуть знову. І знову буде мир, нарешті знову. Ми подолаємо зиму, яка почалась 24 лютого, триває 8 травня, але точно скінчиться і її розтопить українське сонце. І ми зустрінемо наш світанок усією країною. І рідні та кохані, друзі та близькі будуть поруч знову. Нарешті знову. І над тимчасово окупованими містами і селами наш прапор замайорить знову. Нарешті знову. І ми зберемось разом, і буде мир нарешті знову. І більше ніяких чорно-білих снів, а тільки синьо-жовта мрія. Нарешті знову. За це боролись наші предки. Вічна шана всім, хто протистояв нацизму. Вічна пам'ять всім.
And so, with that, that is the end of the speech that we were able to gather from President Zelensky today. Of course, an amazing orator. He's probably one of the best politicians of the modern era and is definitely setting the role of what a politician should be in every single country. I think Starsky would probably have a lot to add to that as well, considering that Zelensky is the president of Ukraine and he is a soldier in the Ukrainian army.
Yes, sure. President Zelensky touched a very interesting topic relating ideology of Nazism in Russia. Currently, it's called Ruski Mir or Russian world. So I was amazed to find out that on the West, people know completely nothing about this ideology, while on the territory of ex-USSR, post-Soviet countries, literally 100% of citizens at least heard about this ideology. So I even made a video regarding this Ruski Mir. And what's interesting is that the word mir in Russian language has two meanings. It means world and it means peace. So you understand what I'm talking about.
Yes.
And basically, yeah, basically, according to this ideology, Russia is a supreme power because people of Russia are born in nature. They live close to nature. They have this energy of nature of their motherland, and they are, this supreme, open-hearted nation that has to rule the world, and they have this best religion, their Orthodox Russian um, church, and they promise to lay their lives for this church. And even despite the fact that like 50% of Moscow is a Muslim population, so there's a lot of Russian citizens of other religions. There are Zen Buddhists, there are Muslims, all kinds of religions, but they still, promote this Orthodox Church. Uh, on the first place, because it has a huge influence in Ukraine and Belarus, those countries that Russia wants to have. And for example, you saw that Lavra destroyed in Ukraine. All Lavras that we have in Ukraine, in Kiev, in Pochaev, and the one that is there, it was captured by Russian monks, like forcefully. This Russian church in Ukraine had a huge influence on people, actually. What he says about Ukraine, so before the attack, Russian president had this speech on the TV, according to which he claimed that Ukraine was never a country. There is no such nation as Ukrainians. We were created artificially, and things like that. So that's their official ideology. So they believe that Ukrainians were created artificially by Poland, partially by Soviet Union, and stuff like that, even despite the fact that Kiev is 1,500 years old and Russia is a bit younger, let's say, a bit.
Yeah, that's true.
Like 700 years a bit. Yeah. So they claim that funniest fact is that on Russian Wikipedia, and I think that you can check it out. So they started editing pages related to Kiev on Rus, and they're trying to remove everything that reminds of Kiev.
Really?
So it's like ancient Rus, not Kiev on Rus, but it's like ancient Rus.
That's bizarre. That's crazy.
Yeah.
And I mean, like, especially considering since Russia as a nation pretty much was birthed out of the Ukrainian area. You know, it's pretty much just the migration of, and I'm making sure, let me make sure I'm getting this history correct. I could be wrong here, but pretty much the birth of Russian civilization was in the Dnieper area, and then they pretty much just started to migrate a little bit eastwards into the steppes, and then that's pretty much what made the Russians come to be in a way, at least culturally.
Yeah, that is true. And they had Novgorod Rus that was founded by sons of our ruler from Kiev. And things like that. It's all history, but now they obviously have their own history, and all other histories are fake according to ideology of Ruski Mir. So yeah, and we see literally new kind of Nazism being born, and not being born, but unfortunately already formed And yeah, funniest thing, of course, is when Russians claim that Jewish Ukrainian President Zelensky is a Nazi. And we all heard the statement of their Minister of Foreign Affairs, Lavrov, who said that yes, he can be Nazi even despite he is Jewish, because Jewish were the biggest anti-Semites, and it made Israel mad, literally. And I totally understand them. I totally feel them.
And there was supposedly an apology that came from Putin, although the Russians have never backed that up. The Israeli leadership said that they were on a phone call and did get an apology for the statement too.
Yeah, because oh my God, there are so many Jewish people were literally slaughtered by Nazis, and it takes to be a goddamn, I don't know, idiot to say things like that. It's crazy, but again, a lot of Russians support that. So I've heard, not like her, I'm getting a lot of commentaries again from Russians who still use YouTube before it's blocked. And yeah, there's a lot of things that a lot of people who claim that it's Israel's fault. Like Israeli, so literally, I receive comments that quote unquote Israeli Nazis support Nazism in Ukraine, and it's crazy.
It really is, honestly. And there's been so much stupid stuff that's come out of the Russians. And also I see it a lot here on this channel as well, people trying to go around and say stupid things like that. And you can actually ask a lot of my viewers here, and hopefully they'll respond here in a second so that way you can see it in the live chat. Some of the stupid things they've seen in the live chat that we shoot down as fast as possible, but they'll, like the bots or the pro-Russian people, because at some point there is eventually like a small group of pro-Russian people around the world, I guess, which is retarded, but they'll sit there and say stuff like, oh, it's like there was one that was going around. This one was crazy. I'm sure you saw this one, where they were trying to say that Zelensky was a cross-dresser that wore clown makeup before he became president or something like that. And that was a really common one about 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, that is crazy. He was an actor. He played in different movies, and he was a very famous actor, by the way, here in Ukraine, before he became president. And I'd say he is one of the most supported presidents, even before the war. So he won those elections in one stage instead of two, because majority of people voted for him. And yeah, he had a lot of great ideas in his election program. A lot of them were implemented. For example, I have my ID on my phone, and I can literally show my like any of my documents on my phone and do a lot of things that even a lot of countries on the West can't do using only my cell phone. Which is very convenient, for example, for our older population that lives in villages somewhere far away. It's very convenient for them. They don't have to go to those establishments and wait in the queue and stuff like that. So yeah, he was very popular, and now I think he is even more popular because he does his job very well as a president. Of course, as a military and as a state employee, I cannot analyze publicly what he does because it's wrong. It's very wrong. But I'm just saying, the opinion of common Ukrainians regarding Zelensky.
And they're very good ones as well. And with that, we're actually going to get to a whole bunch of questions. People have been flooding the live chat with a million questions. So we're going to try and get through as many of them as we can. Of course, we're going to have to cut down our answers a pretty good bit, so that way we can make sure to answer as much as possible. And so with that, what is the next question, Matthew?
Okay, Enforcer. So first up, before we get to the questions, I just want to say that we have broken a channel record. We have hit $35,000 on the fundraiser, which is absolutely incredible. Obviously, our goal is $50,000. I don't think we're going to be able to reach that tonight, but I'm still going to hold out hope for it. The Leaf Spring Army is very strong, so I have hope. Thank you to everybody who has been putting in donations, and we appreciate it very much.
Before we move on, I want to ask everyone this question. If I put in another $100, would that rally enough people that we could manage to reach 50K? Would it? I'm gonna run that as a poll. If I put in 100, would y'all donate to another 100? If I put in another $100, let me make a pun there. Put in, and we'll put a little dash in there. If I put in another $100, would y'all rally? And we'll put that up as a question, and we'll ask y'all real quick, because I will go and put another $100 in this fundraiser if that rallies this army to get to 50,000. Now let's see the answers here. We've got 70% of y'all saying yes. We've got donations coming in now, so while we sit there and wait for that poll to gather up some answers real quick, we're going to move on to the next question.
Okay, and now it is time to recognize some of our top donors. We have a $420 donation from Bubba Conway. We have a $300 donation from Gary Bryan, a $140 donation from Putin My Butt Win. We have a couple of $100 donations. We have one from Max Pesci, I think is how you say it. $100 donation from David Phillips, and a $74 donation from Steve S. So thank you all. We like to recognize our top donors just because of the sheer amount of generosity that's being given here. But thank you to everybody for all donations, even the $5 donations and lower. All of them help us reach our goal. And without your support, we couldn't have gotten to 35,000 that we've gotten to so far. So with that being said, as the good old saying goes, I have compiled 2 questions that are most commonly asked from the people in the live chat. And Enforcer, I think I'm going to let you tend to that poll first, and then I'm going to move on to those 2 questions.
Got you. And so the people have spoken, and 71% of y'all say y'all would rally and the army would progress if I put in another $100. And so we're going to end that poll, and I'm going to hold up my end of the bargain because I see a lot of y'all have already started off on our goal of reaching 50,000, and I'm going to make sure to lead from the front and make sure to put in another $100 to make sure that we can get even closer to the intended goal of $50,000. Hell nor high water, I hope to at least hit 50,000 tonight. And so with that, let me go through here and throw down another 100. And with that, we're going to move on to the first commonly asked question.
And real quick, let me recognize a couple of these donations that are coming in. And they're coming in very fast, so I'm hopefully not missing any of them. We have a $100 donation from Captain Chris 1220. We have a $100 donation from Appalachia Run, an $80 donation from Bulk a $100 donation from Zeta Lane again, and a $100 donation from Tim Kiniski. And let me make sure I'm not missing any here. $100 donation from NBD, a $100 donation from A Random Trip, and that appears to be our biggest ones for the moment, and they keep rolling in, so we're going to keep recognizing them. But first up, we have a question, and Operator Starsky, this question goes to you. So the question is, we know that one of the most important things to Vladimir Putin is his ego. Are you worried that the more Ukraine pushes the Russians back, that Putin will start to feel humiliated and decide to use a tactical nuclear weapon against your country?
That is very possible. And I think he might do that. He can do that. Okay. We don't have information that he is prepared to use nuclear weapons, although we have information that their nuclear weapons are already aimed at Ukraine. But we also received some intercepted phone calls from some of representatives of their command back to home, and yeah, they were talking about it's like either they capture what they want, including Mariupol, or Russia will use nuclear weapon and burn them all, you know. So that's like citation from that call. I think it's available again on the YouTube security service of Ukraine. I'm not sure whether it's translated already, but I hope that they will translate it at some point. So yeah, they were already talking about using their nuclear weapons against Ukrainians in case Russia doesn't reach its military goals here.
Well, it's that's pretty, you know, of course, scary hearing to hear. But what is good to know, and I'm not sure if y'all feel this way in Ukraine, but we do know that the president of the United States has declared about 2 or 3 weeks ago that if the Russians were to use any nuclear, biological, or chemical weapons in Ukraine, it would lead to military intervention from the United States and maybe NATO as a whole. Have y'all heard that information as well, or is that something that was kind of said here in the West but didn't really get carried on to the Ukrainians as well?
I didn't hear that. I think we didn't have that information in our media here, unfortunately. And yeah, actually, I'm curious myself whether it's possible, you know, because, for example, we still don't have any response from the United Nations regarding deployment of their peacekeepers, because, you know, Ukraine was part of United Nations, and we have deployed our peacekeepers to a lot of peacekeeping missions, like in former Yugoslavia, in Iraq, in Afghanistan, and other countries. So yeah, I hope that what the West says about you know its intervention in case this disaster happens, I hope that it's true. I think all Ukrainians hope that it's true.
And we hope so as well. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And with that, we have hit $40,000 on the fundraiser. So everybody has come through tremendously. That was a very, very fast jump from where we were to $40,000. And I'm going to try to recognize a few of these top donors here. Unfortunately, my Mac is being overwhelmed with the amount of donations coming in. So let's see if we can get to some of them. We have a $200 donation from Gary Bryan. We have a, excuse me, lagging a little bit here, $20 donation from Jesse Shaw. We have a $100 donation from Anonymous. And with that, I'm going to have to skip because my Mac is about to crash. I don't want to lose connection on Discord here. But thank you all for all of your donations to the channel. And maybe if Enforcer can see a couple of them on his end, maybe we can still recognize a few of our top chatters if you'd like to, Enforcer.
And I definitely will. And I also want to remind everyone that we are only $10,000. We just got a $600 donation from an anonymous source. I thank you very much for that. And to move on up the list, just remember, everyone, that if you were to put in $5, just $5, which is the price of a cup of coffee, not to sound like the people who work for UNICEF or anything, but just for the price of a cup of coffee, we will reach the $50,000 goal. This Leaf Spring Army has done things that are considered impossible, and reaching $40,000 alone is already beyond what anyone could believe. And so if we all just chip in $5 more, we will have reached the $50,000 goal, and all of that will go straight to Doctors Without Borders, which is helping out thousands of people in Ukraine who have been seriously wounded. So your money, when you support Doctors Without Borders, is literally going to saving lives. So just remember that, everyone. And so hopefully we can get a large amount of support. So I'm going to go through some of the people who've sent in support and recognize y'all, because I'm very appreciative for all the help y'all are willing to give Ukraine as well. And so we've got Stan Morris, $110. Jelly T, $50. We've gotten Katsio with $5. Every bit counts, and I thank all the $5 donors for their support. It's just that so many come through, we can't recognize everyone most of the time, but I'm going to go through and recognize everyone who's just sending something here for a second. EL, $5. Tom Exman, $30. Weeslaw Felisuski, I'm sorry if I mispronounced that, $50. Anonymous, $20. Cynthia Peller, $20. Anonymous, $33. Gary Bryan, we recognized you, but I'm going to recognize you again, $200. Keith Butler, €5. Anonymous with $5, $10, another Canadian 10, $20 from another anonymous source. Jesse Shaw coming in with $20. Jetto 2001, $5. An anonymous source with 50, anonymous with 5. David Giannotti with $5, anonymous with 100. Mark says Sahara, $20, anonymous 10 New Zealand dollars. The Enforcer fan donated $15. Thank you so much. I also like the name. And moving on from that, anonymous $100. S Moore, another $10. Salty Hole, $20. Super Action General, $20. Nelson TX, 200 Thai bots, I believe that is. $25 from Anonymous, $20 from Anonymous, and the list goes on and on. I also like to thank Tony for his $100 support to this fundraiser. And moving on, scrolling down to the bottom, they keep on coming in, just over and over and over. And I've got to thank you all so much for the support. It, of course, goes to help Ukraine a long way and helping relieve their medical system, which is currently strained beyond belief right now. And all of the workers in the medical system in Ukraine are working overtime to try and provide the care they can, but they are being overrun. That's the truth. And organizations like Doctors Without Borders help out in the areas where there are gaps a huge way. And so every bit of support goes to help out a load. We've reached $41,000. We are only $9,000 away from reaching the $50,000 goal. And we just got $5,000 in just a short amount of time, 5 minutes. I know that we can probably reach $50,000 here very soon. I know the Lee Spring Army can do anything, so how about this as a goal? In the next next 30 minutes, we reach 50,000. Does everyone think that's a goal that's attainable? Because I hope so, because the Lee Spring Army could do anything, and I hope that Starsky is seeing here that we have a very supportive amount of people who love Ukraine and want to do as much as possible to try and help them out any way they can. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
All right, and up next is the most commonly asked question compiled from many nights of chatting. So, Operator Starsky, this one again is for you. The question is, in reference to the 1994 Budapest Memorandum, for those of you who don't know what that is, it was an agreement between the US, the UK, and Russia to guarantee Ukraine's security in exchange for Ukraine to disarm its nuclear weapons. So the question is, do you believe that the United States has broken its promise to your country?
I believe that Russia 100% has broken its promise. As for the UK and the US, well, currently we are using their weapons in order to protect our country. And also, speaking of weapons, we can also say that partially using their anti-air missiles, we partially again closed the sky over Ukraine. So we can say that at least this is a proof, at least some kind of proof that they kept their promise. Because once again, we understand that Europe doesn't want to be involved into this war. And of course, we don't want war in Europe. And we realized that currently Ukraine is Europe's shield against Russian fascism. Yeah, your help, weapons, artillery, anti-air and anti-tank missiles are huge help to our soldiers who protect Europe from this invasion.
Interesting. That's an interesting stance on it. Actually, I was thinking here that the U.S. is kind of letting down on its obligations in a way, but it's good to know that y'all aren't thinking that, because to me, considering that in the 1994 memorandum, the U.S. said that they would actually kind of step in with a force of arms to protect Ukraine's sovereignty, and they didn't. I've actually been arguing here on the stream at the beginning that we actually should step up and offer military protection, pretty much guaranteeing Ukraine's independence, or else we would actually get into the war.
The thing is that in this memorandum, it was not an agreement, it was just a memorandum, and it was said that it's literally there. You can check it out yourself. So it said that the security of Ukraine is guaranteed by Russia, UK, and US, and there's nothing about like using their military forces, their armed forces, their troops, nothing like that. It's just like security is guaranteed. That's all. So if I was a lawyer, I wouldn't sue, United States and the UK for that. Of course, at the beginning, a lot of Ukrainians felt betrayed. We were like, "What the hell, guys? We gave up our nuclear weapons, and you promised to protect us. So do something, please." You know. And yeah, and later we have received a lot of ammunition and weapons and stuff like that. So yeah, I think that partially this promise is kept, but still partially. And I think that a lot of Ukrainians think like me.
Interesting. Also, I'd like to ask a question that I've seen asked a lot here in the chat, and I've seen a lot of people asking, and this is a question that I've been asked a million times, so I know that this is something everyone is chomping at the bits to know. What do you think about the Kerch Bridge? I've been saying that it's a major vital supply line for the Russians logistically, and a lot of people are wondering what you're thinking about
it. So, this is the question that I receive like million times a day. And not only from Western audience, but also from our audience here in Ukraine. So like, it's like, dude, I know what you have to do in order to win this war. And I'm like, what? Like, you gotta destroy the Kerch Bridge. Are you kidding? No, seriously? Oh my God. So yeah, Kerch Bridge is important. But we don't have tomahawks in order that we could use to destroy that bridge. I saw bridges in Ukraine that were hit by Russian missiles, and I'm talking like Caliber, and I'm talking like Точка U, okay? And you cannot destroy bridge, especially such a big bridge, with a single missile. Not sure whether even a tomahawk could destroy such a bridge in one hit, and we don't even have a single tomahawk here in Ukraine, unfortunately. Kerch Bridge is quite far from our positions, and we cannot reach it with our Точка U missiles. And it's quite a hard target simply because of its location. It's quite far away. We cannot use our aviation because of such a thick anti-air defense in and around Crimea. So it's hard. It's kind of probably the hardest target that exists there in Crimea. So that's the reason why we cannot destroy the Kerch Bridge. It's not like we are not trying to, but it's hard.
You know that what's crazy is that one thing, well, and I'll let you know this because this is pretty much like public knowledge. I actually have no military experience, but somehow I've been saying all those things, and hopefully people in the comment in like the stream know that I've been saying all of those things. I said Ukraine doesn't have the ability to do it, and if they did, the Kerch Bridge is being heavily defended, and that's why it may be hard, if not impossible, to wipe the thing out. And so I'm glad that you could clarify that, Starsky, because some people were acting like I was crazy saying that. But it's...
that is very true, my friend, and I think that probably we should both dedicate a separate video to this topic.
I think we should, because that would actually be something that a lot of people would probably look for, and also a lot of people like to know specific answers to, because while I'm not a military expert, don't have any military experience or anything like that, I was on point with that, and I hope that and I'm not sitting here trying to blow my own whistle or anything, but I hope that a lot of people see that I actually was right on that out of everything. Once again, Starsky actually is agreeing with me, so that's pretty crazy to know. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a question from Muskrat82, who says, Enforcer, is it me, or is Russia state media starting to change their tune and realizing the special operation is a lost cause?
I have not actually heard that all too much. It seems like there's a couple of more dissenting voices being allowed on television in Russia about how this war is going. For example, the guy we saw today talking about how long a mobilization would actually take to reap any kind of benefits out of it and actually raise new forces to go into this war. We're starting to see a little bit more dissenting voices coming out of Russia as of late, but we still see them generally trying to cling on to the idea that that their army can manage to punch through Ukrainian lines somewhere and achieve this elusive victory that they haven't found over 2.5 months. It's kind of it's something that I think they're starting to have to accept, and I think the government may be trying to push the TV presenters, because they heavily control what they can say and do, to start heading down that avenue very slowly, which may suggest that they're trying to lower the bar far enough that just wiping out the Azovstal, if they're able to even do that, which is a question in itself, if they were able to do that, then they might say, hey, we achieved victory, we wiped out those Nazis in the Azov battalion, and we're just going to leave now. They could do that. I mean, like, who knows? But then again, all of this is really assumptions on my part. You would have to get into the mind of a madman, Vladimir Putin, and I'm not a madman, so unfortunately I can't get a specific answer to that question, but I hope that does answer it to a large degree. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a pretty lighthearted question from John Smith. This is a question for Operator Starsky. How is Mr. Patron's name actually meant to be pronounced?
It's literally Patron. It's literally Patron. And by the way, I saw that adorable dog like a couple of days ago in Hostomel. So we had this event where 5 ministers of internal affairs from different countries, including Ukraine, met and decided to signed a memorandum of joint investigation of crimes performed by Russians, and there was Patron, actually. And I couldn't even get close enough to this dog to pet it, because it was surrounded by all kinds of people, media, and ministers and soldiers and stuff. I think that we should. I have an idea. I have a dog. I don't have it here with me right now, but I have a pet dog. His name is Fuch. And I think that I can use Fuch to increase the popularity of our content. That would be great, because dogs have all the love of people.
That's very true. And of course, dogs are like I'm kind of biased, though. I'm allergic to cats, so I can't like them anyways. But I think you can agree with me, Starsky, that if my channel is to take an opinion on anything, it's that dogs are clearly the better pet over cats.
I don't want to insult those who have cats.
Man.
I love dogs, and for example, in my Facebook, whenever I post something very important, like some kind of analytic or information, and I receive just a small response, and then I post a picture of Fuch just resting on its back and smiling, and this post receives like 10,000 likes. Oh my god. So yeah, I agree on that.
You know what, Matthew, we got corgis. What if we what if we get the corgis, and what if we get Starsky's dog, and we get them all? Well, that would be kind of hard to do. We would have to go to Ukraine, and that's kind of tough right now, but we could get all the dogs together for a photo shoot.
Maybe one day.
Maybe. Also,
we gotta do that for sure.
We do, and also that'll be the time when I get you the shirt. But also, the other thing, a lot of people, I've seen a lot of people asking the question of when this war is over, would you come to America, like not come to live in America, but would you come and visit America?
Guys, I think that I will have to visit all the countries and thank all the people who support Ukraine currently. And yeah, for sure, I think that I will visit United States, of course, and Italy and Romania and South Korea and Taiwan. And I hope that I will have enough life, you know, to fly to all those countries because, yeah, I just want to see those people who helped us. And of course, after this war is finished, we expect all the guests in Kiev to celebrate our victory together with us. So I think that it will be possible to meet in Kiev as well.
That would be a really cool idea. One thing that I was always thinking would be interesting is that when y'all win and when y'all do celebrate y'all's victories, because I'm trying to get into, you know, of course, like the normal video realm, much like you do. Actually, no one knows what I look like, including you. I'm just a voice behind a microphone right now. But we're actually going to be doing a face reveal that was supposed to occur at 50,000 subscribers. But you kind of messed that up today when you shouted me out on your channel because now we're up to like 54,000 subscribers. So we passed that now, and so you know, no big deal or anything. But still, going to do a face reveal here, and then once I do that, I'll pretty much be free to make videos in person, you know, now that that would be out of the way. And so one of my main goals that I've been thinking about doing is if I was to do a video abroad anytime soon, is to actually arrive in Kyiv for victory celebrations, if they were to occur, like, after the day of victory instead of right on the day of. I'm sure that would take time to organize an event, so I'm sure they wouldn't happen on the exact day. So that may be a thing that I may try and do. That's, you know, of course, in the works. I don't really know about the budgeting for that or anything, but that would be pretty cool. We could probably do some kind of a live stream event or something in person in Kyiv, you and me together.
Yeah, I agree on that. Sounds great. Absolutely.
And so with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And Enforcer, I'm looking here, has our fundraiser timed out?
The fundraiser, just for everyone to know, it's still accepting donations, but the fundraiser did time out. It was supposed to turn off at midnight in my time zone on the 9th, and so it did run out of time. We did manage to raise $44,000 before the goal timer shut off. Unfortunately, I can't extend it now because the deadline's passed, but you can still donate, and we are still shooting for $50,000. Just know you can still donate. That doesn't mean that this thing's turned off. It's still accepting donations, and we just made it to $44,000. $44,000. We have $6,000 left to reach that $50,000 goal. So, what do y'all say? One more round. If we can get one more round out of everyone, of everything y'all have got, we're going to reach 50,000 tonight. Could we all pull together and do that as the Leaf Spring Army? Nothing is impossible. We've made it this far, and we can make it that little bit farther. So help me to help Ukraine, and also help Starsky to help out Ukraine, and send in that last round of support, and we will be over the top, and we'll be at 50K. And so with that, I thank you all so much once again. We can do it, and I believe in us. And so with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And our next question comes from a viewer, Texas Militia, who unfortunately, I don't know what happened, but he started cursing people out in the chat, so I had to remove him, but he had a good question. So this is a question for Operator Starsky. He said, can American militia members join the Ukrainian Foreign Legion?
So regarding Foreign Legion, what I currently know is that there are way too many recruits, and actually I've just received a question from one of our viewers regarding Foreign Legion. So we didn't expect to have so many recruits, and currently they are only accepting people with combat experience. So previously you had to have like background in a military or experience of service in law enforcement agencies, but currently they're only accepting people with combat experience. So I think that in case those militia have this combat background, yeah, they could be accepted, because currently in Ukraine we already have like international national battalions. So like we have Canadian battalion, we have Belarusian battalion, like, you know, battalion based on the nationality. So it's much easier in terms of communication within this unit. So yeah, we have quite a lot of them. But yes, in case you have combat experience, you will get accepted. But again, those recruits, they keep coming. We didn't expect that. We simply don't have enough people in our embassies to, you know, to enlist everybody.
Interesting. I actually didn't know that y'all were overcrowded with pretty much volunteers in a way. And with that, real quick, I actually want to recognize an anonymous donor. We don't have their name, of course, that's why they're anonymous. But they did donate $500 and put us over the top to $45,000. We are now $5,000 away from the goal. And I don't want to sound like I'm pretty much like the homeless guy on the street with a cup in his hand, like asking people for change. But we've just reached $46,000. Because Steve 2848 sent in a $1,000 donation. We are getting that. We are getting close. We are $4,000 away. Starsky, I don't know if this would help, but would you give them some words of support?
Yeah, I think that you are people amazing, and I think that what you do is it's fantastic, because, you know, we didn't expect that here in Ukraine. We didn't expect that such a big number of people will support our country, and I thank you from the deep of my heart for doing that.
And if that is it inspires any more of you, let's reach that $50,000 goal tonight to show Starsky how much we support Ukraine. Because we've been here, and you know, like, the numbers speak for themselves. We've raised, before this fundraiser, $167,000 in support of Ukraine through multiple nonprofit organizations. And so tonight, we've reached $47,000. We just reached that. Thank you, Lou Gunn, for $400 in a super chat. Eric Heist, $20. Atrani with $20. Anonymous with $50. David Springs with $60, Anonymous with $50 again, Sean Tyler with $200. Y'all are moving this thing forward. And people in Ukraine cannot believe that, well, they do now for sure. I know that Starsky does because he's here watching it live. But a lot of people in Ukraine at the start didn't think that anyone in the West would care about them enough to do this kind of thing. And so they are completely shocked, and they absolutely love that we're willing to help them out to this degree and actually carry through on some of those promises that our governments made in 1994 to protect their sovereignty. And so while we're not exactly protecting their sovereignty by doing anything to support Doctors Without Borders, we are helping their medical system to a huge degree every single time we give support. And so I want y'all to help me. We got $3,000 left to reach $50,000. And so if we can all come together and just reach that point, I put in $400 tonight of my own money, and my bank account is suffering right now. And so I don't really want to put in any more because then it will really be hurting. But still, make sure to put us over the top, everyone. The Lee Spring Army can do anything it sets its mind to, and the Army keeps on growing each and every day and becoming a little bit stronger with it. And I know that this little army here that we built on YouTube can reach $50,000. I believe in every single one of y'all. It's a task that can be appointed and can be achieved. And so it looks like we're getting a little bit closer. We might reach 48K here in a second. And so with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And up next, we have a question from Yanira. And Operator Starsky, this is another question for you. So they said, have you met Wally, the Canadian sniper?
No, I didn't. And actually, I didn't have opportunity to meet anybody of, anyone from a Canadian battalion. I know some people from my brigade, They are foreigners. One of them is Australian, and I think 3 Americans. Yeah, those guys are very experienced. The guy from Australia served in SAS, I think, and the guys from the United States, they also have combat experience, service in the army, and yeah, they're great guys. As for Wally, I think that after this war is finished, I must make an interview with this guy because he's a legend.
He really is. I gotta say. I mean, like, he's built up a massive reputation, and I don't mean to keep on harping too much on the fundraiser, but Starsky, are you seeing this right now?
Yeah.
$49,000. We are just inches away from the $50,000 goal. Incredibly close.
This is impressive.
For some reason, my ear is ringing terribly, like I can hardly hear myself speaking right now. But we are close. We are very close. We just did it. Caffeine's $20 donations just sent us over the top to $50,000, and we just did it. We reached the $50,000 goal, making this the largest fundraiser in this channel's history. And let me do the math real quick. 1 second, everyone. Hang on. $166,000 plus 50,000. It's probably over that at this point. But we have now raised on this channel $216,000 in support for Ukraine. And I have to say, before we move on to some more questions, and it is getting very late, so we're probably going to start rounding down the question segment and get ready to end the stream. But I have to thank you all so much once again. And I cannot actually believe that we've reached $50,000 tonight. This is something that I considered impossible. The largest fundraiser we had before this was $34,000 and some odd change. And I didn't think tonight, even with Starsky on, that we would have enough support to reach $50,000. And I got to say, I got to thank you so much, Starsky, for coming on and being a cheerleader along with me for this fundraiser and helping it to reach such great heights. I can only attribute this extra amount of success to you being here. And so, of course, I thank you so much for all you've done to help me still run my fundraisers and help out even more to try and get as much to Doctors Without Borders as possible so that they can help out in Ukraine. And I got to thank you so much once again.
Thank you very much, my friend. Thank you for your invitation, and I want to thank all of the donors because I'm not asking for donations on my channel because I have salary in the National Guard. But again, when people send donations, from time to time, I receive requests from my friends from friendly units. Somebody's looking for a vehicle, and somebody needs like a UAV, like hotel. Or DJI, by the way, we learned to patch DJIs so they are not spotted in aeroscope. And then I think, oh my God, thank God I have donators, and I can donate to those guys, and they can buy stuff. So yeah, thank you very much, and we all appreciate what you do here because it's very important for us. And I'm not only talking about your donations, I'm talking about your support in general, your commentaries, your supportive words, and of course, the way you care about our refugees there in European countries, in America. It's impressive, and I thank you for that also.
Well, thank you very much. It is always, of course, and I kind of get the spill to all my viewers. So it's, of course, good to hear that you appreciate what we do. I try and do as much as I can to help out when I can. And so hopefully, well, tonight I definitely can't say I've been slacking off on this one. I put in 100% to get this thing up to 50K. So I hope that I haven't been slacking elsewhere and I've gotten as much help as possible out there. And of course, don't mean to. We won't do that. I was going to start listing off every single fundraiser we've done and thank everyone, but I think this $50,000 goal and it being reached is enough, and I think it shows that we have an incredible group here, and the Lee Spring Army is definitely a force to be reckoned with here on the internet. I think we have a more active group here in support of Ukraine than anywhere else on the internet. Our maximum live audience tonight was 10,000 people, which the largest this channel ever had, just for you to know, Starsky, was 16,000 people in a live audience, and that was at the height of everyone's interest in the world on the war. And it seems that a whole load of people here care about Ukraine so much that they stay, some of them just for the Sunday fundraisers, some of them just for the news. And of course, you being here tonight once again has helped out in delivering the most accurate and up-to-date news that we can, showing the war in Ukraine and telling people what's going on and what the Russians have been doing against y'all. And so once again, I do have to thank you a lot for enjoying what we do here. And so with that, I want to make sure not to skip out too much on our viewers, and I want to make sure that we can answer several more questions and then round out the stream. So I think we'll probably do, if it's all right with you, Starsky, about 7 to 6 more questions and then round out this stream.
Yeah, sure, no problem.
All right, and so with that, Matthew, on to the next question.
Okay, and next up we have a question from Vicious Tuna, who is a channel regular and always puts in really good questions. He says, Enforcer, in Vietnam, we could get the draftees out to the jungle in just 6 weeks. Is Russia's problem a lack of mid-level troops, sergeants, lieutenants, and captains? It seems to be only conscripts and generals.
To answer that question, and I'm sure Starsky can back me up, the Russian military is incredibly top heavy, if that's a good description for it. They have almost no non-commissioned officers. Most of their non-commissioned officer roles in the military are filled by commissioned officers like lieutenants, because for some reason, due to the Russian military structure and the history of the former Soviet Union and now the current Russian Federation, there's always been almost a severe and detrimental lack of experienced enlisted soldiers. And so you have like blind leading the blind. You have brand new officers that have no actual experience leading brand new conscripts that have no actual experience themselves. And so it is a massive detriment to the Russian armed forces that they actually have no experienced enlisted soldiers, and that they're pretty much their entire non-commissioned officer corps, what would be the non-commissioned officer corps, is being carried entirely by a whole bunch of inexperienced lieutenants. And so I hope that answers the question. Starsky can probably back me up on that assessment, perhaps.
That is very true. For example, here in Ukraine, we've built a strong NCO corps, which was very important because very early we realized that an officer who needs to plan, who needs to make decisions and stuff like that, he won't be able, to control everything. So he needs a sergeant to be with the troops all the time. He needs a person that will know like problems and needs of his troops and do all the things that sergeants do. So and that's exactly because officer will be overloaded with information and he won't be able to perform his duties properly. And that's exactly what is happening in Russia. So they don't have this culture, let's call it this way, of NCOs. And literally those sergeants, they are mostly used as other soldiers. So they are not different from any other, conscripts. And that's pretty much the problem.
And that is, I think that's something that the Russians will never be able to overcome, actually, just due to the historical structure and their current structure on how their officer corps is generated. It's just a really like mass system. Like they take everyone who would be an NCO and they're like, hey, why don't you become a lieutenant? And then they all get put in as lieutenants. And with that, we're going to make sure to try and keep this rolling a little bit quickly so that way we can get to several questions, because we haven't, honestly, I've honestly gotten so sidetracked with asking you questions that we haven't answered anyone's questions tonight. And so with that, we're going to move on to the next one.
And next up, we have a question from Mud, who says, Enforcer, at what percentage of Russian losses of their tank force / offensive vehicles will they reconsider continuing the attacks? 30%, 40%, question mark.
Well, right now, we know that they probably lost around 30% of their actual tank force, at least what we assume here on this channel is operating. On paper, the Russians have around 12,000 main battle tanks, but we know due to the lack of budget in the Russian military, all of these tanks cannot be active just because they don't actually have the money to maintain all of them. And so our guesstimation on this channel has always been somewhere in the ballpark of around 3,000 to 4,000 operational main battle tanks. And so if you take the number that we have right now, which is around 1,050 main battle tanks destroyed, that gives you a pretty good idea that already out of the entire tank force in the country, around 25 to 30% of them may have been destroyed. And out of the invasion force, considering that all of the tank forces in Russia, maybe, they may be stupid though, they may have put them all into Ukraine, but some of them may not be on the Ukrainian front, they may have lost around 40 to 50%, you know, as a very idealistic number of their actual tank force that was involved in the invasion. And so I don't know what's really going to make them pause and reconsider, because honestly, they've taken losses daily now that are higher than most countries took during each day in World War II. And so I don't know what would actually make them reconsider their position, because at the moment, it doesn't look like they're willing to reconsider their position whatsoever. And considering that they feel, you know, on the honest level, that if Ukraine was to join NATO, they would be put at such a strategic disadvantage in Eastern Europe that they might as well be screwed. I think they are looking at the war in Ukraine, kind of, although it looks like they will have to eventually peter out because they just can't keep doing this at this rate. It kind of looks like that they're going to try and keep this going as long as possible until, I would say, their entire invasion force is decimated. And that would be a usual Russian strategy. I mean, like in the Finnish Winter War, they pretty much kept the war going until they ran out of pretty much everything. They lost 400,000 soldiers during the Finnish Winter War, which was only over the course of a few months. And once they had lost, I think, about half or more than half of their actual military at the time, they said, okay, well, we'll call it quits now. So I thank you very much for the question. I hope that answers it on my end. And with that, we're going to move on to the next one just because we're running short on time. And so with that, we're moving on to the next question.
And next up, we have a question from Jungle Jim AB9AB, who says, Operator Starsky, what can you tell us about the capture of the 11 Russian snipers recently? Why were they all together?
I gotta learn more about this event. Unfortunately, I just got up like, you know, three hours ago, so unfortunately I don't know anything about this news.
And he's literally been on here since he woke up. Like, he was talking with us on WhatsApp, and he was like, I'm drinking coffee right now, trying to get up. And like, we were like, dang, he's going to be here. And so he's been here the entire stream. You know, y'all of course know that. So unfortunately, he hasn't been able to keep up to date with the news. And also, I'm ignorant to that situation as well. I haven't heard about it. And so with that, I think Starsky and me are going to declare ignorance on that one. We don't know enough about that specific situation to talk about it. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a question from David, who says, Enforcer and Operator Starsky, what difference do you think the anti-mortar radars that locate the origin of enemy mortar rounds will make in the war? Do Russians have similar radars?
I'm not exactly an expert on those specific systems, so I'm going to actually hand that one over entirely to Starsky because he may actually know a little bit more about it than me.
Yeah, those radars are used by our forces as well as Russian forces as well. So we have counter battery forces used to target Russian artillery. I'm not very familiar with their technologies. I know that they have a lot of different radars. For example, they have this radar FARA that can spot not only moving infantry, but also birds. And probably they can spot UAVs with that radar as well. And its biggest downside is that it has smaller range. But they also have and counter artillery radars, so they called, and counter artillery batteries. And yes, we use them successfully, and sometimes Russian troops use them, unfortunately, successfully as well.
Interesting. So with that, I hope that does answer your question. And with that, we're going to move on to the next one.
And next up, we have a question from Roy Hughes, who says, Enforcer, whatever happened to Russia bringing in Syrian fighters into the war? Does Starsky feel that the bridge between Crimea and Russia is going to be destroyed?
So we're not going to, I'm to save Starsky because he's answered that last part a million times. The answer that we both are going with right now is that the bridge is out of range. The Ukrainians don't have the ability to hit that bridge at the moment, and if they did, it's heavily defended. It may not be worth the waste of resources to try and hit it, considering it would take multiple strikes. So that's kind of like the short answer on the first part, and so I'm now going to hand over... wait, could you reread that question again to me real quick, Matthew, so that way we can get that first part, minus the Kerch Bridge part?
So the first part of his question was, whatever happened to Russia bringing in Syrian fighters into the war?
Oh, well, to me, honestly, I just thought that was nothing more than propaganda, because we never actually, at least on this channel, ever seen them being used anywhere. And so I feel like that was entirely propaganda to try and have the Russians buddy up in a way and show, hey, we're friends with Bashar al-Assad. And beyond that, it didn't really turn into anything. But I'll hand that over to Starsky. It just, golly, butchered that. But I'm going to hand that over to him so that way he can talk about it a little.
Yeah, so the story is a bit more interesting because they wanted to have like 14 or 15 recruitment centers in Syria and Libya. And they expected to bring from 14 to probably 30 or 40,000 Syrian fighters. But they only managed, from my information, they only managed to get something like 800 Syrian fighters that agreed to go to Russia and have those, exercises, trainings with them. And later, they found out, those Syrians, the Syrian mercenaries, they found out that Russia is losing a lot of their troops, like thousands, like every day. And they also learned that Russia doesn't have money to pay them on the first place, so they refused to participate. Otherwise, we would have like huge those Russian news about Syrian volunteers who volunteered to fight, because they love doing such videos. And yeah, we don't have them. And I think that we will never see them.
Interesting. I didn't actually know there was that much more to the story. And with that, I hope that answers your question. And with that, we're going to move on to the next one.
And real quick, Enforcer, we're having many people asking if we're going to be showing the Victory Day Parade tomorrow on the stream.
Actually, the Victory Day Parade, as far as I know, is about to happen in about an hour. And one thing that's kind of sad about that is I can't live stream it because it's 1 in the morning. Well, actually, it's 12:30 in the morning for me. And I do have to sleep and then wake up tomorrow and then start on my usual schedule of pumping out my day 75 summary and then preparing for the stream tomorrow because I won't be taking the day off tomorrow. I'll actually be, streaming that day. So, I sadly won't be able to stream that. I know that was a lofty goal I set, but sadly, I just don't think that'll be a possibility because I can't stay up for well, I don't know. I might be able to, but honestly, I don't think so. So I hope that kind of answers the question. And I thank you very much for enjoying the channel and also, enjoying it enough to ask would I stream that. On top of that, I don't even know if I'd be able to give commentary on it rather than just saying, yep, that's the vehicles, that's the soldiers. So with that, I hope that answers the question, and we're going to move on to about 3 more, and then we're going to round out this stream.
And up next, we have a question from Bash Girl, a channel regular, who says, this is a question for Operator Starsky. What military equipment and weapons would Ukraine like to obtain to completely dominate Russia and end the war?
So we need a lot of artillery, we need a lot of attack aviation like A-10, and of course, preferably we would like to have something like Soviet-made, like MiG-29s. Why? Because our pilots wouldn't have to spend time learning, mastering new aircraft. On the other hand, of course, it doesn't matter much because I think that we have enough time to, learn how to pilot those airplanes. We have a lot of experienced pilots who can do that. So I think aviation and artillery is our main requirement at this point. We have a huge amount of anti-tank missiles at this moment, and as well as anti-aircraft missiles. Of course, we would like to have something like Patriot missiles because they're very efficient, and I also think that we could master, using them in a short period of time.
Very interesting answer there. I'd actually, I kind of been saying the same things as well. But one thing I've thought, I'm not really sure, is that some Ukrainian pilots have actually had a small amount of training on American aircraft like the F-15s and F-16s due to some kind of joint training operations at some point, although I'm not really sure if that has been the case.
Yeah, they did because again, our pilots had participated in a huge amount of random international military exercises with NATO forces. I think that they had the opportunity to try F-15s and F-16s as well. So yeah, I think it won't take much time for them to learn this kind of airplane.
Interesting. Well, I hope that answers that fellow's question. It was a pretty adept response. I mean, like Starsky gives pretty good solid answers, probably a bit more than I can do sometimes. And so with that, we're going to move on to 2 more questions, and then we're going to round out tonight's stream.
And Operator Starsky, Starsky, this is a question from me actually. Do you think we're going to see anything major happening during the Victory Day parade, like maybe a big announcement from Putin himself? Do you think it's just sort of an exaggeration, or are we going to see something major happen? Do you think?
I really don't think that he will even participate live at some of these events, maybe in Kremlin or whatever, because probably it's not confirmed, but I think that in one of his videos he was actually he staged this meeting and he used the chroma key, in order to make that. So I'm not sure. And as for some kind of statements, we will see. Of course, he wanted to have this parade in Mariupol, in Melitopol, for example, in cities like uh, uh, Kherson. They are already changing road signs that were written in Ukrainian. They are already changing them to Russian. So again, liberating Ukraine from so-called Nazism doesn't correspond to what they do. They are literally annexing new lands, and we will see. We will see if something will come out from Putin's mouth tomorrow.
Right.
Interesting. And with that, I hope that answers your question, Matthew. And we're going to move on to 2 more questions from the live chat, and then we're going to round out tonight's stream. And so with that, on to the next one.
Yeah, and that covered it pretty well. Hopefully nothing major happens tomorrow. Hopefully it is just nothing, and everything continues and Ukraine keeps winning. But anyways, the next question here we have is from TJ Johnson, who says, Enforcer and Starsky, what are the chances of getting the U.S. to send Tomahawks over? We're all keen on seeing a certain bridge / supply line removed from the board.
Well, I thank you very much for asking a question. Of course, a lot of people have been asking that one. That's kind of a follow-up to it. I'm not really sure if the Lend-Lease will include such missiles as the Tomahawk. We do know that the British have been getting close in that category to providing missiles such as the Poseidon. Well, I'm sorry, not Poseidon. I think it may actually be the Poseidon anti-ship missiles, and also a couple of other weapon systems as well. Well, we haven't seen any countries yet providing a sizable portion of cruise missiles / ballistic missiles, so I'm not really sure if the United States will go down that avenue. But honestly, and for me, I'll just have to wait and see if I can collect any news showing that we will be providing those kinds of munitions to Ukraine.
And also, I'm not very familiar with specifics of using tomahawks. So, for example, in case you need some kind of command center or a whole huge American ship in order to control this missile, so we don't have that ability. Maybe I'm wrong, of course. Again, I'm not very familiar with using tomahawks, fortunately. So yeah, it depends. It depends on things like that.
And so I think that got the answer from both of us there about what we think about the tomahawks. And with that, we're going to move on to the final question of the stream. And then we're going to end the stream for the night. And so with that, what is the last question of the stream?
Okay, and let's see here, just a moment. Let's see. All right, so we have one from Sir Gods who says, ask Starsky how many troops were captured at Irpin.
All right, I will. Starsky, how many troops were captured at Irpin?
We're talking about Russian or Ukrainian troops.
I think
so. So at the very first day of the invasion, in Hostomel, that was the day when we took combat against Russian helicopters that were trying to capture the airport. We had one lightly wounded soldier, and six of our guardsmen were captured, and later they were exchanged. So we all went out of this combat alive. As for captured troops generally, I mean in all the territory, because the encirclement of their troops began at Makarov. It's a bit on the west from your cursor, and through Belohorodka and through Vorzel. No, Vorzel was yet Russian for a while. So it was an operative encirclement of Russian forces, and we have captured quite a lot. I'm not sure about the number, but you have to understand that Russians didn't want to get involved into contact combat with our troops. So they preferred to have those artillery duels and tank duels and stuff like that. So we rarely saw our enemy on a daily basis, only when we had to go and take some specific village, for example. Other than that, when we defended, during this defense, we barely saw our enemy because they were avoiding contact combat, and they used a lot of their artillery and a lot of their helicopters. So I cannot tell you a lot about captured POWs. I can tell you for sure that a couple of days ago we have captured Russian machine gunner in the area of Irpin, and this guy said that he's very angry at his troops because he was abandoned.
Oh, hey, speaking of which, that's hilarious to me because it just reminded me of a video. I hope you saw it, of the Russians that it was snowing at this time, so it was way early in the war. But the Russians were on the side of the road. They had the KAMAZ trucks. They had two of them, and they were out like taking a piss or something behind the trucks. And so most of them got in the trucks and started driving off, but one of them was left pissing, and another one was left standing by him. And so the guy who was pissing, he turns around and starts running towards the truck while trying to pull his pants up, and the guy with him is like running down the street trying to get to the truck, and they literally just drove off and left him there. Like, they never came back.
Yeah, I saw that one. And as for this machine gunner, it's amazing because he spent months living who knows where, like in the fields or maybe in the ruins. After a month he was captured, and we are still capturing those Russians that were abandoned from time to time. I think there's a bunch of them hiding in that area still.
Well, that's insane. And with that, I hope that answered your question. And with that, we are going to round out tonight's stream. I thank you all so much for coming through and supporting this fundraiser the way y'all did tonight. I thought that the $50,000 goal was very optimistic on my part and that we couldn't reach it. But at the same time, in the back of my head, I knew that my viewers, the Leaf Spring Army, could pull through and do such a thing when called upon to do it. I also knew the operator Starsky would help out a whole load in getting fundraisers heading in that direction, and thankfully it did, I think. And so with that, I thank y'all all so much once again for supporting the fundraiser. It means a lot to me, it means a lot to Starsky, and it means a lot to Ukraine as a whole. And hopefully this support will help them ease their supply lines and their logistics a little bit more, at least in the medical field, so that way it can be freed up for even more people like wounded soldiers and other civilians that need help as well. And so I thank you all so much once again for coming around and supporting tonight. And once again, I hope y'all all thank Starsky for coming onto the stream and giving us a lot of his time. He's given us 3 hours and 43 minutes of his time and a little bit extra on top of that. And so I thank you all once again for your support, and I will actually see y'all all tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern Time as normal. We are going to be running a Monday stream because it is Victory Day, and I would like to cover what happens on Victory Day for the Russians, considering that it's most likely going to be just suffering and crying and a lot of coping. So with that, I thank you all once again, and I'll see you all tomorrow. Good night, and take care.